Hey, everybody, and welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by Trainer Road. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee, and beside me is our head coach.
Hi, everybody.
That's Chad Timmerman, and our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hi, everybody.
And we are happy that you're joining us. You can join us live on Facebook and YouTube, usually every Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific, which is what we're doing right now. Some days it varies, and you can always tune in at forum.trainerroad.com or follow Trainer Road on any social channels, and you can find out when we are going to go live on the podcast. But you can join us on those channels. You can submit questions live to us, but also you can submit them all throughout the week. And please do this, because this is how we pull most of the questions that we have at trainerroad.com/podcast. I got a ton of questions submitted. We come through them, and we have a list of questions to cover today for all of you. We also have, if you're joining us for the live stream, you're going to get to see a bit of a different view than normal. We usually just had one camera, but we decided why just have one. Instead, we just jumped to 4. So there will be a lot of changing going on. First time that our fill-in producer, Bryce, here will be going through and managing the switches on that. So if you're joining us live, have patience if we make mistakes or anything else, and you get a whole lot more close to us than you have before.
Should just be on Chad the whole time.
Yeah, Chad just leaned back, expressing a lot of uncomfortableness with it.
See where I can escape the frame.
Exactly. So with that, before we get into anything, we should talk about some race takeaways. We raced our bikes this weekend. People were building up the fact that you and I were going to race each other, Nate.
Each other? We're racing with each other.
Exactly, and that's what they missed, right? That's what they missed. We were a team. Do you want to talk about the criterium first? Because you did a road race the next day, and we have some takeaways on that too.
Okay.
But let's talk about the criterium. So it's this will be up on our YouTube channel soon. You'll be able to follow a full race analysis. I had cameras on my bike. Nate, you had cameras, but something went wrong.
The front camera, this is a GoPro Hero 7 issue that I've seen, is that it records for about halfway through the race. It stopped recording video, but it recorded the sound. So it was just like this still frame.
Nice.
And looking online, a whole bunch of people have the same problem, and you can't recover it. So if someone else has this, so the GoPro hasn't said this is a real issue, but the users think that maybe if you record in 1080p rather than the 2.7K or 4K, that might fix it. Or might not prevent it, not fix it.
Yeah. I've had, I didn't have any issues with the footage, so that's good. And we get to see, this is cool because we haven't had a race where we have 2 different riders with cameras in the race like this.
Yep.
So this will be fun. So you had what was your goal going into this criterium?
To win.
Right. And
Get points. Get points, really.
Right.
But that means winning.
Of course. My goal was far from that. I wanted to get in basically this is something that you said a long time ago, Chad, and it really stuck with me is when you have lower priority races, think of the different objectives you want to achieve with that instead of just going out and trying to win, perhaps.
It doesn't always have to be about winning.
Yep. So I set the goal of getting in a very high quality, really hard workout, basically. I shouldn't say high quality because there's no real structure to it or adherence to that, but a really hard race effort because I have 2 weeks now, this weekend and the next weekend, I'll be racing pro XCTs and getting points for national championships in mountain biking, which is a higher priority. So my goal was to attack and attack and attack and attack and just keep doing that. And your goal was to try to win the race. And actually, we kind of talked about this beforehand. You always lay out plans. This is exactly how it's going to happen. On lap 27 and turn 14, we're going to do exactly this.
Yeah, what I said at the end is if you see me at the back, within 3 laps to go, help pull me up into the wind because it was a windy day.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I said was at the end, if you can give me a lead out, string it out, that'd be awesome.
And we kind of thought sure, if we have the ability to somehow dictate how this race goes exactly how we want, then yes, we'll do those things. And it actually ended up working out.
Yep. So what happened is about halfway through the last lap, Jonathan came to the front and you pulled really hard and strung out the field. So it was me and Jonathan going into a little technical turn section and then into a headwind. It was kind of a headwind to the finish. Jonathan gapped the field right there, maybe 2 bike lengths. I took a bad turn. We slowed down a little bit in the corner. They got back on. But about 50, I think it was 52 seconds from the finish, I attacked from Jonathan, went by you and said, block. And what I meant by block is not swerve around the course, but what can happen is if Jonathan tried to get back on my wheel right then, he would have filled in this gap where that would have been, especially on a headwind, could have been where the whole field was still pulling on me.
They just needed that missing piece between them and you.
So that's a really good, I think, one takeaway is if you're trying to do this strategy with a lead out man or someone going really hard is don't try to slot back in.
Yeah.
because it kind of ruins the whole thing.
And don't do the crazy dramatic swerve off thing.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
jam on your brakes.
Nope.
Like what I did after that is I was completely spent and I just boom went into soft pedal mode and people could see
You're
it
still
and they went
responsible
around
for the
me.
safety of the riders behind you, so you can't just throw caution to the wind.
On the rear camera, you look very tired.
Oh yeah, very tired. I blew up. But so we'll have a full video with like more insight and a ton of learnings from this one because I raced it very differently than you did. So it'll be cool to see that. But I wanted to share some of those.
Yeah, let's talk about tailgunning and the difference in the
Let's do it.
the difference in the race between if you're attacking a lot and covering things, or if you're at the back, and I was trying to be as smooth as possible.
So for 41 minutes into the race, or I guess from point zero or minute zero into 41 minutes of the race, what was your normalized power?
242.
And my normalized power at that point at 41 minutes into the race was all the way up to 312, which is pretty crazy. And you weigh how much on that race day?
Probably 189.
And then I was weighing 145 that day.
Yeah.
So that shows two totally different ways.
Quite a big difference in the amount of work you guys did.
So there is, you hear this all the time. Like, this is all you hear is never give up a position, be at the front, fight for every wheel, right? Oh,
That's what people say.
We didn't say, like, when I attacked, I won the race.
Yeah.
So,
Good job, mate. Yeah.
First Cat 3 race, won. Awesome.
Got the points. It's pretty sweet.
But the, thank you, Jonathan.
The common wisdom, so to speak, is always to stay in that front third, stay in the top five, whatever it is.
And then you have to fight the whole time for every wheel. And I think it matters the course and the category, right? So if the category, a higher level category and a technical course, you can have teams and it can be 30 miles per hour the whole time. There's no spot to move up. This course we've done before. There's no teams that are just going to push it the whole time. I think if you weren't there, Jonathan, there'd be maybe less attacks.
Yep.
And every lap, it kind of fanned out. After the headwind section, everyone was tired. There was a little bit of crosswind. It fanned out. And you could literally get to the front in about 5 seconds. So thinking that, why I didn't put out a whole bunch of energy until the last 9
Yeah,
minutes.
you had really good course knowledge. I mean, you did this, literally 3 times that last weekend?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is a big misunderstanding, I think, and it's hard because you have principles, right? But a lot of people just take the principles as absolutes and they forget to separate principles and context and try to figure out what
Still
to
got to
do.
be logical.
Yeah, because there's so like you've mentioned, there are plenty of different courses. Like a course like Nevada City, for example, is going to be very different from other courses. And technical races, if it's like an urban crit and you've got a lot of turns and a lot of something like that, then it is really important to make sure that you stay in the right position to be able to make those sort of moves. But in this case, it wasn't even needed. But the cool part is, like, so there's the attacking side of things, which, like we talked about, maybe on those more technical courses, you have to be able to kind of match those attacks or be in the position to at least be able to maybe make some of those attacks, that sort of thing. But on a course like this, you don't have to. But it's cool how, as a team of 2, we were able to utilize both strategies, and it ended up working out really well. It's kind of an ideal scenario. Doesn't always come out ideal.
And if there was a breakaway, you would have got in it because you were right up there.
Yeah, well,
which is cool.
Yeah, I was in a breakaway. I bridged for 1 whole lap, and then I was in a break for for a lap and a half. I think.
mean, so if one would have survived, though, I think you would have been in it.
And
Which
then
is
you also know where your fitness is right now, so that if a break had gotten away, you'd let it establish itself and then get across to it. I'm sure you would have tried at least.
Yeah.
And probably done.
I
that.
would have tried.
Yeah, Nate wasn't sitting back there because he needed to. He was sitting back there because he could, and that's like an important distinction.
It's an appropriate strategy considering what you know about this course, what you know about your fitness, what you know about your competition.
Yeah.
So I want to. I went into the Trainer Road analytics thing and I broke it up into 2 different laps. The first one of 41 minutes of 242 normalized power. The last 9 minutes, my normalized power was 367. So
Huge
that's a
difference.
120 watt difference. To give you an example, at my current FTP, that 242 normalized power for the first 41 minutes, that's about me doing a little more than half of Baxter. But at sea level, it's probably like half of Baxter.
Yeah.
So you can think that is.
So that's like a 50,
What
60%
percentage of your FTP is that
FTP.
Oh, I don't know. Someone do the math.
Yeah, somewhere around 50
More
to
than
60%.
50.
Like
If
60,
50 would be nice.
65.
I'd have a 500 watt FTP.
It's like an
That's
endurance
true,
ride.
yeah.
It wasn't
It's an
like a race
endurance
at all.
ride, yeah, right? Like that I could hold for, at sea level, probably 9 hours.
Right.
Like, or maybe more. So that just shows you, like, at those last, I think I moved up at 4 laps to go. Then I was fighting for every wheel, and I was pushing a lot of watts, but I was so fresh during the race. You only had to work for 9 minutes rather than, you can think of a trainer workout. 9-minute workout versus a 50-minute workout.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a big difference.
Yeah, and the other thing to think about is when you were at the back here, and I was constantly attacking, and there weren't that many attacks outside of what I was doing. But when I was constantly attacking, the people that were eager beavers, so to speak, that really wanted to make sure they didn't miss a move, that sort of a thing, they were the ones that were going single file and trying to hold on. They were getting tired, but where you were at,
costly stuff
it
covering
was really
everything.
easy because it kept yo-yoing like that, and you were able to just stay consistent.
It was really good because, so here's what I was thinking in my mind. And people who hate race reports, sorry, but this is strategy.
This is strategy.
So you're out front and you're attacking. So anyone who wants to get in the break or is that kind of rider is spending all this energy, right, the whole time. And they're going to get tired for the finish. And so what's either going to happen is you're going to establish a break. That's great. I can try to bridge. But if not, at least you're in the break and you got a good chance at the end. The other kind of people, maybe there's a sprinter, right? But on this course, with the headwind coming in, and we like scouted it out and we talked about it. We've talked about it on this podcast about attacking into a headwind. And if you attack into a headwind when there's not a team to help cover you and a gap establishes, you get the rider's dilemma of
hesitance.
Yep, if I cover this, I'm going to lose the race. I went that a couple extra seconds for someone else to come around me and cover it.
But then everybody else thinks that.
Yep, and then you're so far
you're
so far
stuck.
ahead. And I did it far enough out at 52 seconds that it is like that's as a sprinter, that's too far. You can't start sprinting at 52 seconds. So it's really good is that the people who would be in the breakaway got tired with Jonathan, but then I jumped the sprinters early, and it wouldn't have worked as well if we weren't strung out. If you string it out fast like that, it was I think single file all the way. Right?
Oh yeah.
So if Jonathan were to, so you're really only racing about 5 people then.
Yeah.
Right? Like
You whittle
everyone
it down.
everyone in the back of the field is no longer in the race for the win. So that's another great strategy. And if you weren't there for the end, it would have been a totally different race because, I couldn't have dictated the pace or made it fast. And if it was slower, they would have had a easier chance to jump on my wheel when I attacked.
Sure.
More people would be there. I'd have to accelerate faster.
One key point with this course, and this happens with a lot of courses, is the tight turns that you experience toward the end of the lap. Those sections are bottlenecks on the last lap, meaning if somebody messes up in front of you or somebody takes a bad line, it can be the separation that doesn't allow you to win the race later on.
Yeah.
So it was, I think, a good time to attack in that case was to go before that to string it out. So then we had a clear track and we didn't have to worry about anybody in front of us.
What also happens too is that you can't pass with fitness on those tight sections. There's maybe like 1 or 2 people who will come around and like dive bomb something. But in another section, and you've probably seen it where it's wider, and a whole train of people come up the side, right? If that can happen at any time during the course, and one teammate can sacrifice themselves. But if you're going, I think we had a tailwind, but we were going 35 miles per hour into a corner. There's not much you can do to pass you. You're not going to go in at 40 and hit the brakes and like.
Yeah, you crash. Yeah.
It worked out. I think the best part is at my car before the race, we said, let's do exactly this. And then we did.
And it worked out.
That never happens.
So some data on this, and like we said, the race will be really cool to see on YouTube, so you can check that out. But some data on this. I attacked 19 times over 600 watts, but they were 620 watts is like the average on the attacks. The lead out attack, so it was just a 671 watt peak, but it was 500 normalized power for 30 seconds. And then 366 normalized power after that, I guess on the lead out part, right, of holding you there at the end of the race. It was, and this is usually like the number one thing not to do. But once again, in this case, I wasn't focused on winning the race. I was focused on making it hard for myself and sure, make it hard for others too. But it was 500 normalized power for the first minute of the race, which is really high. And then 400 normalized power for the first lap, which is about 2.5 minutes. But that kept it single file for the first bit of the race, and it did spit people out of the race instantly on the first lap. Yeah. So in this case, if you have a rider that's going to be a sacrificial lamb, so to speak, that wants to be the attacker, it can be really helpful. And especially if that rider still is able to accomplish their goals, then that's really cool. And then if you have the other person that's tail gunning on the same team, it can be a really good combination to use.
Or if they're a sprinter. Like that's another example of if we had a couple people try to get in a breakaway and then you have sprinters who just sit in the whole time.
Yep. And then the last thing I wanted to share on this is teamwork only works when everyone is 100% committed. When you have a rider that's, kind of committed to executing the plan.
Yeah, I mean, that's the nature of a team.
Yeah.
Everyone's on the same page or it falls apart.
Yeah, and so it's on the onus is on you as a team member to express your desires before that race, long before, communicate them, so then there is something that you can actually get behind, and hopefully go with. That's a good team. A bad team would be, well, actually not necessarily bad, but just a team might just tell you exactly what to do and you have to do
Something
it.
else you guys demonstrated is it doesn't have to be a big team. I mean, you guys were a team of 2, and you pretty much owned that race. I mean, you ran it as you planned, and it worked out, and you got the win.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Pretty impressive.
Neat stuff. Good job,
Thanks,
Nate.
Jonathan.
Yeah.
By the way, it's in my car. I was planning on having here. I won a beer, a giant microbrew beer.
Yeah.
That's for you. And I won $65. That's for you.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah, you're the lead out man.
one
So
thing
you
you
can
get
get it.
more than money.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so remind me afterwards. It's in my car. It's
Wow.
like giant too. It's like a local,
Fantastic.
huge thing.
All right.
It's like a quart. I don't know,
Yeah, like
half a
magnum
gallon.
of wine?
I don't know.
Oh, or a growler?
I don't know what it is.
Okay.
Chad
Either way,
wa-
it's a lot of
It's a
beer.
big beer.
Chad wants Nate to keep winning races.
Yeah,
Keep it up, buddy.
So Nate, after that, you went and did a road race the next day.
yeah. Bariani Cat 3.
We don't have GoPro footage from that one because it's basically just covered in mud because
Yeah.
your bike looked like you rode through a cross race.
It was the worst, the most dirty. Anyway, basically on that, I got worked over by teams hard. Mike's Bikes and SunPower and
In what category?
Cat 3.
Okay.
Dolce Vita.
No Masters, just
Yeah.
Just
Elite
Cat 3.
threes, Okay.
They all worked really well as a team. I made a lot of mistakes. I got 6th place, so I still got 2 points. But a couple learnings from that. One is I have to pay in a road race when there's like 3 teams of, I don't know, 5 to 8 riders, and then a bunch of single people. I have to be at the front more in a road race when a break could establish, and then look at the jerseys, because when there's 3 people in the break. Here's the annoying part. 3 people got in the break from each team, and then we were going slow, like the other teams were kind of at the front, and it was a center line rule, kind of hard to move up.
so you're constrained to a narrow lane.
Yep, going slow. We got passed by the previous group that started because we were going really slow. The team was trying to go slow. And I'm like, man, this is going out too far. I go to the front and start pulling, and the referee comes over and goes, "You can't do that. You gotta stop." I'm like, what? He goes, like, there's other groups up the road. I'm like, yeah, but we're gonna pass them in like 15 seconds because I'm going hard and we're gonna pull back this break. He goes, no, they're on the last lap, so you have to wait. We had 15 miles.
15 miles of
Yeah.
neutralized?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's
So was
brutal.
Did that break just...
So the break kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But then on the last lap, me and 2 other guys, we pulled them back. But obviously, that made me a little tired.
Of
course,
I mean,
yeah.
the break's tired too. They've been out there for a while.
I know you,
But it didn't come back together.
but
It's
I
just the
have
6 of you.
I have like 15 other guys that are fresh on the other teams. So
Yeah.
as soon as they come back, they attack.
So
which
when you
is
say you and 3 guys pulled it back, you mean you pulled the field back to the break, or you, as a
pull
group
the
of
field
3?
back to the
Oh, I
break.
see. I see.
Exactly. So that's
Because the
exactly.
teams didn't need to work, so they just sat on your wheel and let you pull them back up.
Yeah,
Exactly.
That's not a good strategy.
And they were messing up the break too.
Oh.
They a bunch of times, we were working together as a team of 3, and then I'd look back and there'd be like 5 Mike's Bike guys on my wheel, and I'd wave my arm, and
They,
I
they were
pretty much,
doing the right thing.
They were doing the right thing. I'd pretty much go to the side and hit the brakes to 17.
Other than tucking into that field, your job was to get across to them alone, hoping that someone came with you or cover someone else who was trying to bridge, but not towing the whole field.
And
back.
there's only so much you can do there, right? Because you can't control what
You
another
have to
rider
gamble.
does.
I mean,
You can't
you're
in that
gambling one way or
situation.
the other. You're gambling by sitting in and hoping it all comes back together, and you're still fresh enough to do something toward the end, or you're gambling by trying to get across to them, hoping. A big gamble, hoping that someone comes with you, or you're stuck out there solo. In which case,
Or you bring the whole team back with you, and
well, you
just
don't.
kinda
That's when you
swear.
shut off your
Yeah,
your
exactly.
You're kind of screwed, right? So
Oh yeah, it's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah.
Battling teams as an individual.
I thought we had already lost the race because of that, and I just told the other guys at least we'll get a good workout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? So what happens, Chad, is if I did try to bridge, the teams were smart and they just cover me.
Yeah.
And
that many riders.
they
are
had
going
so
to.
many riders, and it was so far up the road that even if I have a really good 1-minute power, in 5-10 minutes they're going to pull me back as a team, and I'm just going to be extra tired then. So.
Tough spot.
So this highlights the importance of not missing the break, right? Because if you had gotten in that original break, maybe they would have not let it happen, but maybe you could have snuck in there. and then
Maybe,
it
but
would
I
have
mean, when
changed
you
it.
see a rider from each of 3 in the only 3 teams go away, you've got to be there. I mean, that's a move that you watch get far enough ahead until you feel like you can get across to it cleanly. But that is the move.
The annoying part too, though, is when I don't know if they know me, but when I would do that when there was a break and I'd cover
you
it,
quickly.
they'd cover me and then counter
that's
and
too
just
bad.
keep doing it. So
Doing the
that,
right thing.
That's appropriate tactics for
I know.
sure.
They're doing the right thing.
So even if it wasn't like any breakaway I did start, and I had a 1 minute power PR to establish a breakaway with people, but then the whole they just chased me down every
Yeah.
time, even if it was with their teammates, which
They
was
got,
annoying.
They got a lot of firepower. You said they were 8-man teams.
I think one of them was 8.
That's
I think
ridiculous.
Mike Spikes
In a
was
cat
8,
three.
maybe 6 or 8, and they were smart.
to it.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
that is hard.
That's real hard.
The guy who won the race, Olympic rower, junior guy, amazing. He's like me, but better in every way. He's like 6'5", a little heavier, way stronger, probably a 400 watt FTP.
Yeah.
Won every road race he's done so far. Been a
Past Olympian, you said, right?
Yeah, something
Yeah.
like that, or Junior Olympics.
As a rower.
Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, I got 6. I got 2 points at the end, so that's
Something.
That's something. The other takeaway is peeing on the bike. I've tried to do
One of
this.
the many challenges of road races that I don't think too many people think about.
Yeah.
Road races and triathlon, right?
I
Like,
tried to do this for years in triathlon. I've never been able to.
Yeah.
But Jesse from Reno, he walked me through it. Okay, so I'm gonna walk you through how to pee on the road.
And we're gonna keep it PG. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So while pee, or how you pee on the road.
That's good.
While the field is going slow, you have a friend come by, good friend, and push you. That by not having to pedal, it's amazing.
Yes.
And then you stand up on your pedals, put one pedal down, and lean over.
Yeah.
I did that. It was like 3 seconds,
yeah.
and I was able to pee. And then pull your friend back because you've probably been gapped a little bit.
You can do it on a downhill too.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah, it's a little harder,
involve a
though.
Friend. Not a fast downhill. It could be a gentle grade, but fast enough to keep you rolling.
This is the tough part of skin suits. I think is a tough part with this one.
Yeah.
No, you pee through your suit.
So you can, or you don't pee through your suit.
You can also
you have
hike
a
leg up.
2-piece. Yeah.
Or
pull
just
a
hike
leg up, do
It's-
something like that.
It's awkward regardless.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And then you have to let the muscles in action
Yes.
relax, and that's a tough thing to do, especially while
Oh, yeah.
riding a bike.
Yeah, it's a part that most people never talk about, and that's why you'll see a lot of the time in a race they'll call for nature breaks, right? And they'll a leader, or somebody in the group of authority will end up.
That's
calling
an
for a nature
alternative
break.
too. I mean, if the field's really slow moving and that break is away, like you described, you can actually stop, take a quick whiz, and then hop back on the bike and reintegrate.
A couple leaders called for that while their guys were in the
Of
break.
course,
Yep.
of course.
Hey guys,
That's
let's
what I would
do
too.
a nature break.
Pretty tempting too, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then it's even more complex when you get into women's racing and everything else. It's tough, man. Yeah, but my solution for that: don't do long races. Just do short, fun races.
But I had to be like 15 miles in.
All right, let's get into Greg's question. He says, hey, team, this is more of a, forgive me, actually, this actually isn't a question. This is just an observation that he wanted to share with us, and I felt like it was really good, so wanted to share it with everybody else. He says, 2 years ago, I was competing in a half Ironman with a personal best of 4:55. So decent, not amazing, but decent. That's fast.
That's very fast.
Yep. He says, then for my job, leading an engineering design team, we entered multiple intellectual property lawsuits around the world. These lawsuits were the result of my team's work. This became a very stressful time in my life, but I continued to try and train and build fitness, but my compliance to my plan was terrible. Over the last 2 years, I've gained 10 kilograms and lost a lot of fitness. 2 weeks ago, we settled the lawsuits. In the last 2 weeks, I think I've ridden more than the previous 6 months combined. I thought I'd share my thoughts now that I'm out the other side of this stressful time. Firstly, I can't believe how much the instant removal of work stress made me find joy in training again. Secondly, and the piece of advice that I think could help the listeners, I should have acknowledged the extra stress and the toll it was having on my life and just looked to maintain, not build fitness. I think I would have done much better. Thanks for reading and hope this can promote some discussions on stress, mental health, and fitness. This is a super good point. I see this pretty regularly with a lot of people that they'll send me messages or they'll send in questions to the podcast, that sort of stuff, and they'll be wondering what's going on. And once you ask them about their life, then it's everything else gets piled on, and you realize
so many nebulous things that you can't quantify that affect the quality of your training, your ability to train, how you perform in general.
Yeah.
And he's up against it. And it's funny. His first point, he can't believe how quickly the instant removal of work stress had an effect on his riding. And I can think of 2 times in particular that my best rides fell on the heels of a breakup. We got past the breakup, and I mean like a day passes. So they were coming from a ways out.
Yeah,
So you knew it was gonna
Tell us more, Chad.
it was going to happen, but then it finally happened, and all that stress that was there literally the night before is
Yeah.
gone the next morning. 2 of the best rides of my life.
Huh. Yeah.
So it can have a pretty immediate impact.
Absolutely. And I think that's always, it's tough. Like, so parenthood is an absolute stressor. Like, regardless of what anybody says, it's tough, right? It's hard.
I don't think anyone said it's not tough.
I hear some people say, yeah, I love it. It's not
They're
tough.
liars.
Yeah, exactly right. It's a huge amount of stress. And when I see like professional athletes having kids and everything else, part of me is super excited because it is amazing, just raising your kids and everything else. There's nothing better than that. But at the same time, I almost feel like if you're a pro athlete, I kind of want to be like, wait, like that is stress that is affecting your performance. And if you can,
For sure, but it's also stress you can adapt to.
That's a good point.
And I think it's underplayed the fact that we can adjust to all different types of stress. We just look at the physiological side of things. We're just looking at how our body can handle a certain amount of stress, recover, come back a little stronger, and we just keep that going. But it applies to the other forms of stress too. I mean, you get used to being a parent. You get used to your new job. You get used to being under a heavy class load at school. I mean, these things take time, but eventually you do adapt to those levels of stress.
Yeah, it becomes the new normal.
Another thing that has to be trained in some respect.
I'm sure that your body, you adapt to that stress, but I'm sure that if you were to offload all of that stress, you'd
for
somehow
sure.
be able
It's still
to,
stress. It's still stress, and you can only accommodate so much stress. And we always talk about mental versus physical. And I break mental down further. I look at the psychological component, the emotional, and the intellectual, because there are distinctly different types of mental stress. And then the physical side is easily, right? It's just training. But what we often omit is sleep and nutrition part of that too. It's very physical. And if you get either of those wrong, it takes a toll on you and it adds to the physical stress you're enduring.
Oh,
I mean, your diet can stress you out. Your lack of sleep can obviously stress you out.
This is why this is complex, because this can add more stress. That's everything kind of goes like this. But this year after Kona, and I stayed there for a week, and it was just my wife and I, and every morning she was like, go ride your bike. I want to sleep in. So I had like zero responsibilities and stress. We were in Hawaii. It's great weather, and I was able to get out and ride every morning. I felt like I could absorb way more stress.
Sure,
and it was really helpful.
Stress you're really dealing with.
Now, granted, if you're on a family vacation, you're going and riding your bike instead of being with your family, then that can cause more stress. So it's a complex thing. But when you look at, if you are looking at how to get faster and you can't train more, you can't do that sort of stuff. If you have any ability to reduce the number of sources of stress, or reduce the stress coming from specific sources in your life, that can be really helpful.
It's a general term, but it's stress management. I mean, we're not, if you want to remove that, all the other forms of stress from training and just look at training and the other forms of stress, they can boil down to stress management. How well you manage all those things is going to have a direct impact on your training, your performance, your recovery, all that.
Even things like to-do lists, using calendars more, making sure that you just do the small due diligence things will remove a lot of stress.
On the matter too, and resources.
Yeah, there's plenty of ways to reduce it without eliminating the source of the stress. You can manage it effectively in other ways.
Etc.
Yeah. And then I think the other way too is if you do have a lot of stress and that's just the way it is, making sure you can recover effectively, right? And that's if you can maximize the ability to recover from those workouts.
Our next question will allow us to expand on that a bit, but it does come down to, as always, effective amounts and qualities of recovery.
Good transition, Chad. Thanks. 5 points. Jesse's question, he says, hey, Trainer Road, I'm new to structured training, but I'm a big fan of the app and the podcast. Keep up the good work. My question is whether an active job helps or hinders my recovery. My job consists of walking, standing, and light lifting, and I wear my polar heart rate monitor frequently, and I burn about 2,000 calories at an average of 85 beats per minute for an 8-hour shift. I'm wondering, forgive me, if this adds to my fatigue level or if it is helping my recovery. I enjoy an active job, and I obviously can't quit or stop training, so do you have suggestions to enhance recovery or active recovery or limit excessive fatigue? I've always thought of my shift as a warm-up for my bike sessions, but maybe I'm wrong. Thank you for the great products. This is you mentioned something with the mental stress, that sort of thing. We're talking about a physical job in the case of Jesse here, but I know a CPA, and anytime it's tax season and it comes around, and anytime I've seen him on the bike, he looks like a zombie. And it's not because he's lifting a bunch of heavy stuff. It's just because of the stress that comes with he's more or less sitting at a desk, but it's still a huge amount of stress.
Same goes for students. I mean, any student who's coming up on midterms or finals, same thing. They're typically they'll probably try to keep doing everything and just end up getting sick, but something fails in there.
That sounds about right. I mean, Nate, you're CEO of a company. You have a lot of that's a high stress job. You have a family. You have all of these things too. Have you found anything that have you found anything that you've used to help manage that and reduce stress?
Alcohol. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Not working out.
Yeah.
That's probably it.
Something has to give.
Yeah, I mean, the common things like delegating as a CEO and that sort of thing. So that's helped. There was a tough time, well, not tough, but just busy. I remember back in the day when I was one of the only engineers or one of the key engineers, and if I didn't do something wouldn't get out. Now that we're a bigger company and we have great employees, I can extract myself. So you work on your business rather than in your business, which is a cliche, but that totally helps reduce stress if you're in charge of stuff.
Yeah, so I worked for UPS for a number of years, and I tried to race bikes both before, during, and after.
That's tough.
And for a while, I did what was called the sunrise shift. So we're talking like 3:30 a.m. shifts, which you throw packages, load trailers. I mean, it's very physical.
I knew it.
That's the term. That's
what they tell you.
Anyway, it was a term. We didn't literally throw them, not always.
Snuck that in.
And it was the same thing. I mean, I had to go through a habituation process. I had to learn, this is a stressful job. I'm going to have to, I didn't, but I should have recognized I'm going to have to cut my training load at the same time, because all I did was tank my training.
Yeah.
But over time, I got used to this. Over time, I also had the luxury of switching shifts. So I switched to what was called a twilight shift. And now I'm working in the afternoons, which made it tough to race in the evenings. So there was a sacrifice. But the fact is, I timed my stressful part of the day to the same time of day. I could do my bike workouts in the morning. And then if I'm fatigued for anything, it was my work shift, not as big a deal in terms of my performance. But the fact is, I did get used to it. And my training did get back on track. So even though I had this heavily stressful job, I got used to it. The stress reduced. I got a little fitter, and I was getting fitter on the bike too, and racing better. So it can all coalesce at some point. You just got to stick with it, and of course manage it. That there is too much.
Oh yeah, I think a big transition for a lot of people when I see friends that are going to school and then they go into their career, and that shift too. It's hard to say if it's more or less stress, but it's a very different type of stress.
It is. And another example is my girlfriend's a veterinarian. When she graduated from vet school, I met her shortly thereafter. So she was pretty new to the real world of being a veterinarian. And all the things they didn't prepare her for in school, and all the things that weren't real in school were very real now. And her stress was sky high. But over time, she got used to it. And the things that used to just terrorize her are now day-to-day occurrences and hardly phase her at all.
Yeah. And that's a good way to think of things. Just because it isn't the same stress that you had, or you may feel like, let me rephrase that. You may feel like you have more stress in a certain situation. It may be exactly the same amount of stress if you could quantify such a thing, but new stress feels like it's a lot, and it's tricky to be able to manage that. So I feel like a lot of some things that you can think of with this is making sure, and Chad, you're going to get into a little bit more of
just
like the mechanics of what's going on here, but forecasting this a bit, if possible, I think is really helpful for cyclists. Like if you look, for example, if you are a CPA or something like that, I'm thinking of like seasonal workers, and you have a really stressful time period that you know is going to come up at some point. If you have that sort of situation, then try to ramp your training down perhaps during that time. So then you don't find yourself or you get into a hole.
Well, I mean, just to touch on the endocrine side of it or the hormonal side of it, you're basically operating in a constant sympathetically elevated state. I mean, cortisol is just part and parcel. It's something that should be there occasionally. It's there more frequently, and it's like a steady chronic dose of it. So it has to be balanced at some point with some parasympathetic activity, something that relaxes you. You got to go from fight or flight to eating. I can't think of what the term is right now. But what I see all too often is that some people deal with their stress by adding stress, and they don't recognize it as such, but they want to get on the bike. They want to go do a workout. They say, I need a hard workout. I got to deal with all this stress, when in fact all they're doing is really compounding the problem.
Yeah.
So you might have to seek out alternatives to such strenuous activity and find other ways that are outright relaxing and in some way bring you back down from that heightened state.
And I find that when I travel, not working out stresses me out even more. Yeah. And when you travel, it's tough.
A vicious cycle.
I haven't done this yet, but this is what I'm planning to do next time is and Chad, I want your response on this. Instead of doing like my normal trainer workouts, try to do on a spin bike in the gym, 30-minute train road, very intense workouts. Because 30 minutes I feel like is less stress, maybe enough though that my brain thinks it does something, and it will probably, they're also usually VO2 max or anaerobic. They hit your system so hard that maybe will help maintain a little bit more.
Yeah, the maintenance will be there, and it's short-term enough stress that you might not completely run yourself down. And I know you'll get your nutrition right pre, post, and afterward. So I think it's absolutely worth a shot. I mean, anytime I'm always trying to steer people who are time constrained to those shorter, more intense workouts, because there's a lot of bang for the buck, and they just don't have the toll that doing a 90-minute sweet spot workout does.
If you have a race during that busy time period or anything else like that, or during that high stress period too, like you said, Nate, when you don't train, it only like makes you get even more stressed. If you have a race and you haven't properly set your expectations to account for the amount of stress you have, and you go into that race and you underperform, then that can even snowball even more.
Then you start training more.
Yeah, exactly. And then you just push yourself deeper. So a lot of it, I feel like, is managing expectations with your training, with your racing, with everything
let yourself
else.
off the hook.
Yeah,
You know that this isn't going to be your best race. It can still be a good race, and you can still achieve any number of things, but it might not be the best display of your performance capabilities.
remember, I mean, chances are most people that are listening to this, you aren't paid to race, most likely. So
Hey, you made $65.
that's actually true. I take it back.
You are a pro now.
Yeah. But chances are you're not paid to race. So you don't stress about that. If you're going to have a bad race, if you're going to have a bad season because of a really stressful time, that's okay. Remember, being a bike racer is a lot about being or I should say being a racer is less about winning and it's about competing. And you have to find joy in that whole process.
You can table some of the racing. You can
Sure.
be a little more choosy. Pick the events that really matter to you, and recognize I'm not going to be able to race as frequently as I normally do because of all this added stress. Forms of stress.
Absolutely. Rafael Nadal, the tennis player, I've one of the books, I can't remember the name of the book, but I read a book that was somewhat of an autobiography of his. And he was talking about how he really learned. He went through he had a Pop Warner Papa, as they call them in the United States, or in other words, a dad that's pressuring him and kind of living his dreams through his child, and how tough that was growing up for him, having a lot of that stress, that sort of thing. But he found that he absolutely, he fell in love with the battle of tennis, right? Of the actual competing part. And his whole life he was brought up to just focus on winning. And if it wasn't winning, it was an absolute failure. And as a result, that cascade of problems that happened thereafter. And it's something that I think can help bike racers, especially because it's not just two people. You don't have a 50-50 chance, but you have so many racers that you're racing against. Chances are you're not going to win in a bike race when you line up. The odds are likely against you. So in that case, it really does help to manage your expectations and to fall in love, so to speak, with that challenge of racing and battling and whatever micro battles you have within that race. Sure. So it's really helped me, at least, because I'm very much like I have to win at all times sort of a person, and that's helped me enjoy racing a lot more. Makes it a healthy thing for me. Gordon's question. He says, you have referenced several resources on the podcast before, including a report from Team Sky on the rates of altitude acclimatization among athletes. My question is whether you have seen any similar studies on the rate of altitude de-acclimatization. My goal event for next year takes place between 9,000 and 10,000 feet of elevation. I live in Denver at around 5,300 feet, but have the opportunity to spend up to 10 days living and training at 8,000 or about 8,500 feet, 4 weeks before my goal race. Would you expect the adaptations my body makes to perform at that altitude to deteriorate over the subsequent 4 weeks back at lower elevation? Always enjoy the podcast and the insight you provide. This is a fascinating question.
Yeah, it's a pretty easy one to answer to. Yes. Yeah. I mean, 4 weeks is too long a window, unfortunately. My only resource, I didn't cite any studies. I didn't dig them up. It probably wouldn't be too hard to find if you just look for, I'm not sure he's a researcher, but Dr. Louis Passfield. He's a PhD of sports science at the University of Kent in Canterbury in the UK. And if you haven't ever checked him out on YouTube, he's absolutely worth looking into because he's super well-spoken, really just friendly, animated guy, and he knows his topic well.
Cool.
But according to him, the benefits begin to wear off after just a few days. So you return from an altitude camp and you're already starting to lose some of the benefits. But that's emphasis on the word begin. So it's not to say they're gone. They're just starting to deteriorate. And the benefits you're chasing in particular are an increase in your red blood cell count. and increase in your plasma erythropoietin, or what the kidneys release to stimulate red blood cell production.
Got it.
And that starts to happen right away, and then I think the bulk of the benefit lasts roughly 2 weeks. I mean, I'm sure there are different rates of decay depending on other variables that I'm not considering here, but so we're looking at about 2 weeks. So ideally, if you can schedule it within 2 weeks, that'd be optimal. He also cites or mentions a period of a couple weeks of unwinding. And that's further. I mean, we're just talking about you have this full benefit and it starts to taper off. So, maybe you can drag it out to 4 weeks, but over the course of that 4 weeks, it's only lessening, unless, of course, you're at altitude, in which case maybe some of it hangs in there. And this is why. I mean, you used to see they mix up the Tour de France a bit more, but you watch the guys in the Tour de France, they do this altitude camp, and then they have 2 weeks of riding basically flat stages before that third week in the mountains, or maybe the tail end of the second week.
Yeah.
By then, they've lost so much of the benefit of that altitude camp that it was kind of, I won't say it was all for nothing,
Right.
but the amount of benefits they carried into the initial part of the tour where they're feeling good and they're on flat roads doesn't necessarily
Starts to drop
translate to
off.
where they need it most. It's too bad.
I would also say that the 10 days at 8.5K feet is not enough to be fully
not.
adapted either.
No,
Right.
there might be some benefit, but there's a huge genetic component to it first off. So some responders and some non-responders, and it's not one of those some people respond to exercise, some don't. That's some BS. I mean, that's really just a matter of dosing and finding the proper dose. Not so with altitude. Altitude, there's some people who respond and some people who simply do not.
I wonder how much of that, and I don't think we have the answer. Maybe you guys know, but I wonder how much that has to do with blood volume. I'm thinking of the book Faster by Michael Hutchinson. And I remember what he was talking about was he had like a huge VO2 max, it's a great book, by the way. If Faster, I think all three of us have read that one, right? Yeah, a great book if you want one to read there. But and he's a great author. He writes in a way that's really entertaining, but you still get everything that's very informative.
It's a fun read always.
Yeah, and he was talking about the fact that so he had a really high VO2 max. He had plenty of different things. He was a pretty tall guy, but he had I don't want to. Maybe it was double the blood volume of a typical person that would be in his size. In other words, he had a ton of blood on board.
Yeah, that's
I
largely
wonder-
plasma volume. I mean, that could be just he was adapted to the heat, doing a lot of work in the heat.
Could be.
For some reason had greater plasma volume,
I wonder-
which can actually give you a kind of a false negative of sorts when you look at your hematocrit. I mean, blood volume goes up, but the red blood cells stay the same.
Yep.
Your hematocrit actually goes down, even though you really didn't lose any red blood cells. You're actually carrying more blood plasma, which is a beneficial thing.
Yeah.
Ideally, you want them both to go up, in which case hematocrit might stay exactly the same, but your
Yeah.
performance comes up.
I'd be interested to see. It would be cool if somebody could figure out, effects of overall blood volume on your performance at altitude. Like when we're talking about the genetic.
No, ideally you
components,
carry both. You do heat
Yeah.
training to boost your blood volume. You do altitude training to boost your RBC count.
Yeah.
And both those two things work hand in hand. And if you can make that work, time it out. I mean, the highest level athletes try to do that very thing.
Yeah.
Try to combine both benefits.
Yeah.
and
Interesting
then
stuff.
Just one little bit of advice that this comes again from Dr. Passfield is that don't compete too soon after a camp. Give it a couple days for your body to readjust to whatever altitude you return to.
Yeah.
You noticed that, don't you, Nate?
I just, before our races this weekend, I slept up at Squaw Valley, which is like 6,800?
Yeah, 7,000 roughly.
7,000 feet. And then went down the morning of to race. Man, I felt so bad on that Saturday race and the Sunday race. I almost felt sick. Like not a lot of energy. That's another reason where I was like, I'm just going to stay at the back field. I can't do anything.
Yeah.
Please no breakaways
It
established.
could have been that. Could have just been an off day. But yeah, there is something to that. So give yourself a little time to adjust, especially if you're going from high altitude. Say you're at 6,500 feet, or in your case, 8,500 feet, 3,000, 4,000 meters, and then you go back to sea level. That does merit a couple of days of re-acclimatization or adjustment.
For us, we're at 4,200 feet, and it's great to like go down to sea level, like especially if we can go day of, and then race. And so you get the 2 days back to back. It's
Yeah.
enough where you're getting all the benefit, and you come back up here.
Kind of magical.
Yeah, and you get to
It's
get
pretty
that.
sweet.
You get that great workout too at sea level.
Yeah.
The only thing would be better is if we could live a little higher. If we were at like 7,000 all the time,
Yeah.
that would be amazing. We go race
Sure.
at sea level hard and then come back. That would be ideal for anyone
Well,
to do.
see
right?
that's another thing. Gordon, in particular, you mentioned 8,500 feet. That's well outside of the 6,500 feet, quote unquote, optimal altitude or elevation. Sorry,
That's
So,
a challenge for Colorado,
I'm
actually.
a little concerned that if you're training at that height or at that altitude, I keep saying altitude, at that elevation, then that might actually come at a detriment to the responses you're looking for. I mean, you might not be able to hurt yourself bad enough, is what I'm saying. So if you're training at that elevation and then also, or if you're sleeping at that elevation, that's one thing. But if you're also training at that elevation, that could be, could actually hamper performance.
Yeah, that's a complication that exists with a lot of Colorado training, is in the sense that you kind of have like a polarized scenario where you have the valley and then really high.
And it's the basis of live high, train low. I mean, ideally you sleep up at altitude, but you train down at more oxygen-rich environments.
That's what's so great about here or a place like Majorca, for example, where you have sea level and then you have going up to 6,000 feet, whatever else it is. But even here in Tahoe, I think that's why we're seeing now every year more and more pro teams and everything else staying here to train for a portion of time before the Tour de France, because you can sleep at 7,000 feet, but then you can train down here at 4,000 feet. It's still, low enough so that you're not doing quite as much damage, that sort of thing. And it's an hour drive and then they're down at sea level if they need to be, roughly. So super fascinating stuff. We're going to talk about elevation, I'm sure, a whole lot more as I get ready for nationals.
Which is at 9,
just under 9,000 feet.
Ouch.
That's the base elevation,
That's
I
high
think.
enough to be a real concern.
Yeah. And then after that, basically, I have a race in Durango, Colorado. Then I have nationals. Then I have the Yeti Tribe Gathering. And then I have Leadville. So all Colorado stuff.
Altitude stuff.
Leadville being the highest. But it's going to be it's a long time trying to figure out how my body responds to all this stuff. So Carrie says, "Hey guys, thank you so much for an awesome program and very informative podcast. My husband signed me up for Trainer Road a few years ago after our second kid, as I was looking for a way to lose baby weight. I've used the program on and off for the last few years with more consistency in the last 12 months. I love the structure and having Chad make the workout decisions for me. I have enough to think about." I'm sure, because she mentions right after this, she says we now have 3 kids. Yeah, you have a lot to keep track of.
7, 5, and 3.
Yeah, and our small business owners launching our second mobile bike shop this spring. This means time is at a premium. I mostly train for fitness and fun and not to get dropped in the local weekly women's mountain bike ride. I'm currently finishing up Sweet Spot Base mid-volume 2 and then plan to start General Build mid-volume. However, this year I bought a race license and I'm looking at doing my first race in over 4 years, a half marathon XC race, which we assume is probably somewhere around like a 2-hour race.
We're just going to assume that.
Yeah. I've never heard of a half marathon, but I assume that's probably what it is. In early April, after that, I plan to continue with a season of cross-country racing and possibly trying cyclocross for the first time in the fall. So it's not just a one-race deal, but she's prepping for, a whole race or a whole race season. Yeah. Forgive me. Life being as it is, chances are high I will go straight from the trainer to the start line with no time for any outdoor rides. I know this isn't ideal, but it is what it is. Any advice you can give on how to best optimize my chances of surviving and enjoying the ride and race? Mental strategies, gear, hydration, nutrition, a miracle. 5 stars from Carrie. Thanks, Carrie. Appreciate it. So the first thing that comes to my mind is, she mentioned gear, and we'll cover it because I think that we're more going to talk about is like the strategy, the mindset, and the pacing, that sort of stuff. We'll talk about that. But on the gear side of thing, we've mentioned this so many times, and especially with mountain bikes, make sure you have a lot of gears. If you have the liberty to be able to get a drivetrain, and upgrade that sort of a thing, get either the new, you can get Shimano XT has really wide range. The new XTR is really hard to get right now. I don't know if it's even readily available, but that has really wide range. Or you can go with a SRAM, anything from NX all the way up to XX1 if you want. But it can be pretty darn cheap. I think it's, I want to say it's like $375, and you can get a cassette, shifter, and chain, and the rear derailleur for a 1x12 setup. And it would be Eagle. It's just a heavier version of it. But gearing, I feel like, is huge, because if you end up going into a race and really what I'm talking about here is more just about, early season, hasn't raced in a long time, that sort of stuff. And when you can give yourself more gearing, that really helps.
I didn't put this in the notes, but you tell me, how badly do you get made fun of or frowned upon if you wear pads to an XC race?
Look, if anybody makes fun of you for that, then that person can go kick rocks.
Yeah, no, I get that, but
it wouldn't be very common.
Commonly?
No, I wouldn't expect it at all. I've never seen that actually at a race, other than kids against
I've
each
worn
other.
pads at races.
Yeah.
XC races?
Yeah. No one made fun of
Some
me.
XC courses are pretty brutal, and I absolutely understand that. But I'm just thinking if she doubts her handling skills, and maybe some pads would give her a bit of a sense of confidence.
Totally, yeah. It really really can help. And they make pads now that like a G-Form and plenty of brands, other ones have it, but they're really light duty. They're like the foam that once it has a fast impact, it becomes more firm, but they're really light duty, so they don't impede a whole lot. So yeah, that could help. But outside of the gear, I think there's a lot of different things.
Yeah, so
you can
my
do.
first bit of advice to you, it would simply be, and this is a common piece of advice that applies to so many situations, is just play to your strengths. You know your handling is not top notch, but your fitness is pretty good. So count on banking. Just ride the course accordingly. If there are points to exploit your fitness and then kind of gain enough time or whatever to be able to manage the losses on the more technical sections or stretches, I'd absolutely go that route. Know that you are fit, so that's something that weighs heavily in your favor. And the handling skills, I don't know what your background is, but they'll return.
Oh yeah.
If you've been doing this for quite some time, even if there's been a layoff, they'll come back.
It's like riding a bike.
Hey, yeah. Yeah, it's good, Nate. Yeah, it's good. Nate's got his own little drum and cymbal over here.
Waiting for that.
The thing that you have to remember, like Chad's saying here, is your fitness is going to be great. It's important to set expectations. Like you aren't like you've reached the end of a specialty phase, but the Sweet Spot base plan is designed with workouts that get you ready to race. And we talked about it last week about racing in the base phase. Oh. It's absolutely a thing.
And this, you've said it. This is your first race of many. So just use this one to get your feet wet in terms of riding outdoors again. But I appreciate that the fitness is going to be there.
Yeah. Nate, did you have something to add?
I got a lot to add.
Okay. Yeah, jump in.
I'm going to jump in. There are multiple aspects of this. One is going straight from the trainer to a race is not ideal. It is really good.
It's worked for me. It's worked for me really well.
It's worked for you in the past, right? You said you and Bubba, I can never say Bubba's last name right.
Melcher. So our team was Clover at the time, and we spent the entire winter indoors. I don't think any of us did an outdoor ride. Maybe a couple guys went out one time, sort of thing, or got a weekend or two, but it wasn't much. And I know, based on how often I was training indoors and they were there most of the time, they were doing the bulk of their training, if not all of it, indoors. And then we go to the Southern Nevada stage race and just owned it. I mean, I won the overall. We went 2-3 in the TT, 1-2-3 in the crit, something like that. I mean, we owned it. And this was a combined 35 plus, 45 plus field. So this was, I think, 90 guys. It was a good sized field. And we had the fitness. We didn't have the exposure to the outdoor. We did have a lot of experience, so we knew basically how to ride our bikes, but we hadn't been on them in quite some time. That's a little unnerving, especially in a big, fast rolling pack.
That is the second thing that I want to talk about is so this is mountain biking, which is a little bit different. In the pack, I feel like, yes, at first it's unnerving, but after you get a couple laps in, everything comes back as long as you're experienced. If you have never done this before, don't have your first ride be in a race. If you've never been in a race before, I would do it more. But even with me, who hadn't done racing, I don't know, in 8 months, couple laps in, everything comes back and you feel normal then. And then to the first race of the year, I think everybody feels that way, even if they've been riding outside.
Always remind yourself that if you're feeling like something because of a general rule, like this is the first race of the year, that sort of thing, remind yourself that everybody else likely is feeling the same thing.
Early season races, even the best racers are a bit twitchy. Still got to get our feet wet again.
Oh, totally.
Now for mountain biking, the skill is more important. There's a huge range of skill. I think if you're more like Jonathan, you probably don't, you're probably just fine jumping into a race at any time during the year. Someone like me, I'd like to get at least one ride in. I might go to the race the day before, try to pre-ride the course. That would help me with confidence, and it would actually increase my speed a lot more on that course. So I wouldn't knock it. Like, I've had great success too. I haven't done a single outdoor ride in, I don't know how long. Very, very long time.
Yeah.
Months and months.
And you've been having great success at races this year.
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
The next thing about Sweet Spot Base, we talked about it. You could totally race in that. We were talking yesterday. John had a good point. You can't expect yourself to be as sharp as you will be in specialty.
No.
Of course not.
Sure.
But in the forum, there was just a post. Jarrett Oldham, he's from Chicago, and he used Sweet Spot Base High Volume, which has pretty much no intensity.
It's just Sweet Spot.
Yep. He's in Chicago. He can't ride outside. And he just did the Redlands TT, got second place by 1 second in the pro. Like in the the P12, he's going in today's race. Yep.
Wow.
That's
so he's
sweet.
doing amazing.
Good luck
doing that, and he had a blog post about this. You can go to forum.trainer.com and read it. Just that the season's long, right?
Yeah.
So it might be racing until September.
Yeah.
So there's no point, and I think I've seen it a lot, and everyone's a little. It seems not everyone, but some people are too. They want to do too much preparation to get to race. Like, oh, I'm not race ready. I'm not race ready.
Yeah, that's common.
You're
Oh, yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. Why is that?
I think a lot of it is because of mismanaged expectations. Like a lot of people go into a race and they build up the hype or the pressure on themselves to absolutely win every time that they come into a scenario, or PR, wherever else it is, that they come into a situation where they basically it's tough. Like you build this up. I did this my whole life with racing motocross, and it sucked because it made me not want to race. But I basically thought I was up here at one point and I had a great achievement, and that's where I need to be at all times, right? And I never let myself mentally fall from that. So then anytime I raced and that was reaffirmed, it made me not want to race my bike. And I think it's just because it's natural for us to want to hold on to that success that we've had. Yeah. But the point is, if you look back from wherever that high point of success was, I guarantee you, if you look back at it, you had a bunch of results that built and brought you to that point. And that's just how it happens.
For some racers, it's not interesting to race unless they think they can win. And I understand that, but at the same time, there's so much fun to be had racing a bike that doesn't necessarily involve high placing.
Totally, yeah. I think another thing that you have to do, especially with mountain biking and cyclocross, criterium racing, anything that's particularly surgy, it's very easy to go over your limits very quickly. Mountain bike racing starts really quick.
Yeah, be realistic. Then, don't expect miracles.
Yeah, exactly. So stay within yourself. Like if you know right now that, when you do a workout and you've done that workout indoors, this is another perk for training indoors, is you get a really good figure on your fitness, and you've done one and you say, man, I did a workout the other day and it was a VO2 intervals, and when I was riding at 120% of my FTP for 3 minutes, I felt like I was going to die after those. Yeah.
But to touch on,
keep that in mind when you're racing.
With expectations, expectations can be damning. But if they fuel proper motivation, I mean, if they're based on realistic experience, previous, prior, near experience, recent experience, then by all means, set some high expectations.
Yep.
But if you're coming into something, we're on a different...
Yeah, on carries.
But if you're coming into something like this where you haven't been outdoors yet, you can only expect so much in terms of your handling, and obviously it's based on previous experience too, but be realistic. The fitness is there. Maybe tone your expectations down a bit about how well you're going to ride your bike.
Yeah.
There's one more thing I want to talk about race readiness, and is that very few of us are at like peak level fitness for our genetics. And you got to think about it like, so let's say your FTP is 200, and then all through the winter you do only sweet spot and you get your FTP to 250. You're like, but I can't do any VO2 max intervals. They hurt. I can only do 115 for a couple minutes. But if you think of it relative to where you were before, even if you were totally sharp at 200 watts, 250, it's a whole new ball game.
You're faster.
You're way faster, and you don't necessarily need to like be doing VO2 max workouts before. I've had great success in the last 2 years of doing really just solid sweet spot, and then having some of my first VO2 max workouts be mountain bike races because they're super fun and they push you hard. You go really deep in a mountain bike race when it's short, pudgy uphills. And I had higher power outputs, even though I had done no VO2 max workout before, because my foundation was so much higher.
Yep.
Yeah. And a lot of what you do when you're operating at high percentages of VO2 max, when you're doing VO2 max repeats or intervals or efforts in a race, the sweet spot basis is excellent for a lot of that stuff. It's not focused solely on that, but it covers a lot of those bases.
Yeah.
So you can still expect to be able to put out high sub or super threshold watts for extended periods of time if all you've been doing is sweet spot.
Totally.
So it'll be really interesting to see how this racer, Jared?
Carey. Yep, Carey.
No, yeah. Jared, the guy at Redlands.
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious to see how the rest of his racing goes with power output that high.
Well, it's going to be hard no matter what, because it's
one of the most competitive road races in the country.
It is.
Yeah, it's
so again, second in the TT by 1 second.
Nice job.
With just trainer work.
Way to go,
and
man.
I think, too, he said he borrowed a friend's bike that he'd ridden twice. It's crazy.
That's cool. Huh. That's awesome. Way to go.
That's impressive.
Let's move into Patrick's question. He says, a few episodes back, you mentioned that it's beneficial to add on some aerobic work to the end of an intense workout, sort of like doing Tuesday and Wednesday workouts back-to-back. I'm wondering how this applies to brick workouts. Do the same benefits apply if you do an easy zone 1 or zone 2 run after a hard workout? Thanks and keep up the good work. And I should mention, he also said 5 stars all around. So you can leave those ratings on iTunes. We appreciate them. Chad, do you want to take this one?
Yeah.
Cool.
So yes and no, Patrick. There are different aims when we double up on bike workouts or tack a couple different types of bike workouts together in a single workout, as opposed to doing a brick, which effectively does the same thing but with two different disciplines. So if you're not familiar what a brick is, it's in the multi-sport realm where you either triathlon, duathlon, where you're running off the bike. So you do a bike workout and then you follow it up immediately, transition into your shoes and go run.
This is also known as how to make every cyclist feel terrible about themselves.
Yeah. When you do a hard bike race and all the triathletes slap their shoes on and go
for a jog. Yeah.
And some of them run fast. And straight. I think they're trying to impress us. I think as soon as they get around the corner, they're going to
just start walking. Just sprint around the corner.
I haven't thought about that. That's a good point.
Wait 15 minutes, sprint back, and be like, that was a good 15 miles.
I got 7 miles.
All right. Sorry, I took you off. I took you off course.
So different aims with each of these, bricks versus combined bike workouts. Bricks, we're really looking to carry fatigue into the run. Familiarize yourself with what it feels like to run with heavy legs. And also maybe work on a bit of conditioning too. See if you can bring your post-bike runs up a little bit relative to the last few. Try to strike that balance between how hard you can push on the bike and still run fast off the bike, that sort of thing. So there are a lot of things that we're targeting with bricks that aren't really about improving aerobic fitness, whereas with the bike workouts, that's entirely what it's about. So especially when we do a VO2 max workout and then tack on like some endurance work at the end of it, what we're shooting for there, and I've talked before about the two different signaling routes that lead to the same aerobic adaptation, the flipping on of that PGC1 alpha and more mitochondrial growth. And that's with the aerobic workout, the hard anaerobic efforts or VO2 max or high aerobic, whatever you want to call them, we're looking for the AMPK signaling. So there's two different types. I'm not going to go into it, just that each of them stimulates the same adaptation, but it does it in a very different manner. And when we combine this workout, you're doing the one, and then when you're completely spent and you're basically out of gas and you can't do much work anyway, we're trying to target the other route.
So you utilize that other channel, so to speak, to be able to bring about more.
And we're just trying to perpetuate the signaling that's already going on from the high intensity workout, and then trying to add some of the signaling that comes about because of the low intensity, longer workout. So it's just, we're going for a double whammy there, a double effect in terms of this whole aerobic signaling cascade.
So does that, I can see how that would happen with running, being, kind of like two different things.
Well, see, that's the thing. So you can maybe get some of that benefit too. I mean, these muscles are similar. The muscles utilized and the muscle actions are similar. I mean, pedaling a bike and running, those are similar joint actions. I mean, there's different stressors and they're not moving quite the same way. But the fact is, if they're fatigued from the bike and you're carrying that fatigue and that glycogen depletion and all the things that comes with it into the run, you might also derive some further aerobic benefit from that too. It's not what the bricks are about specifically, not in my case. That's not why I designed them or placed them where I placed them and how frequently, et cetera. But it is a possible benefit, yeah.
So you're really not going for when you're doing 2-a-days on a bike, you're not necessarily doing the same thing as a brick workout that a triathlete would do.
No, not exactly. I'm not trying to teach people on the bike how to do a really hard criterium and then last for another half hour at a slow pace, because that's not a realistic scenario in any situation. I just can't imagine where that would
That's
unfold.
Getting dropped. That's what that is.
It is. Getting a far enough lead that you can just
train to
hobble
get
the
dropped. Sorry.
So if you want to do this on our software and there's a workout that doesn't have that extended amount at the end, by the way, that's usually at 70%, 65?
Yeah, I try to keep it between 60, 65.
Yeah, okay.
It's not to say you're stuck right there, but it should be a not all-day pace, especially with some fatigue in your legs, but it's right in that 60 to 70 ballpark.
So that's percentage of your FTP.
Percentage of FTP, yeah.
So after on any workout you can do this, and I've been doing this, is with our extend cooldown feature. You can click that up. I like to try to do 30 minutes, and if you click the button before you can undo it, I feel like I'm more likely to finish than adding 10 minutes and then adding 10 minutes and adding 10 minutes. If I add 30 minutes right away, I'm like, I don't want to leave that workout uncompleted. But you can do that if you're on a smart trainer. You can switch it into resistance mode and just shift and hit your wattage. Or you can tap up. It's a little annoying right now because I tap up a whole bunch. And there was a limit on 200. I believe we're changing that. I don't know if it's in there already, that we want to be able to raise it higher than that. Hopefully in the forum, a product manager can answer that. But you can really add it to any workout, and this is anecdotal, but I've noticed benefits. And you're so warmed up, it really doesn't. It feels easier, right? Like it's like so much easier than a regular aerobic ride. which you think it wouldn't be, but you're all warmed up and you've just done such a hard
It's
work.
relativity too, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
You're like, you just worked so hard. You're like, now this is
It's
easy.
a lot more tolerable than doing it cold. Or I won't say a lot more. It's tolerable in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Let's go to Dane's question. He says, you've recently been covering different ways to train for races, but what if you don't have any races planned for the year and your main goal was just to stay fit and strong for club rides? If that was the case, what training phase would you do? And would you still go through all the plans? Meaning, in what he's talking about here is we split our training into 3 sequential phases, which is the base phase, 12 weeks, the build phase, 8 weeks, the specialty phase, 8 weeks. If you're doing triathlon, then those durations shift a bit for each one, in the sense that, the sprint tri will be slightly shorter than other ones, that sort of thing. He says, or would you just keep repeating one of those specific phases when you're going through it? This is a super common question, not his exact one, but the same principle at work here, where basically I don't have a race.
Yeah.
How do I train?
You don't have to be competitive to want to improve fitness.
Oh, yeah.
And to get faster. So just this is something I want to address frequently, is that periodizing your fitness doesn't apply just to competitive athletes. Non-competitive athletes benefit from the same trajectory. Basically laying down basic fitness and then layering it with more rigorous types of fitness or more rigorous types of workouts. That applies to anybody who, like I said, wants to get faster, wants to enjoy being on their bike more.
Yeah, it's kind of a. I mean, if you think about it in the context, we use weightlifting a lot. Like, I'm not saying you, Chad, but like in your mind.
Does.
Yeah, it's
Look at
pretty
him.
jacked. Yeah. But you use weightlifting a lot in your mind to think about this stuff a lot of the time when you're talking about structured training, periodization, everything
It's
else.
an easy parallel, yeah.
And when you look at the way that, whether it's bodybuilders or whether it's people that are just trying to build an overall strong body, they all utilize periodization. And it's just a common thing. But it's weird because cyclists a lot of the time think like, no, like if I'm a serious guy, I train like a serious guy. If I'm not, then I shouldn't train like that. But the fact is you can still really, what we're all getting at is getting faster. That's the goal, right?
Yeah.
Because it makes your outdoor rides, when you're riding with a group, it makes it way more enjoyable. It sucks when you are barely holding on to a group.
Yeah.
When you're riding a mountain bike and you have to get off and walk and go up a hill, or all of your friends are waiting constantly at the top of the climb, that feels really bad to be that sort of person, or be the person that's holding up the group, right?
How do you know?
I've been that guy. The first time I ever rode a mountain bike.
One time, guys.
Yeah, I remember that one time.
No, the first time I ever rode a mountain bike, I walked my bike up to the top, or on the Flume Trail. I walked it up the 4-mile climb, and the guy I was with, he did it 6 times while I walked it. So I felt pretty bad about myself. But so the thing is, though, if you're more fit, it doesn't mean that you have to race. It just means that riding gets more enjoyable.
So maybe you go from being fit to more fit to even fitter, rather than from having basic fitness to more specific fitness. Maybe we don't target the specificity that we will with a base build specialty cycle. That's totally okay. This is the one of the instances where I'd say don't worry about that specialty cycle. I mean, there are reasons for it. We'll talk about those real quickly, but you don't have to. You don't really have anything specifically to specialize for. So why not just bounce back and forth, go base build, base build, base build? Because every time you move from phase to phase, you reassess FTP. But every time you repeat that base build sequence, you're going to reassess FTP too. So even if you did the same plan both times every time, or both plans every time, you're coming in with a new FTP, ideally.
Yeah.
And the workouts are a little harder, a little more productive, elevate you to a higher level of fitness.
Sure.
So you could get away with that. But it's not to say you don't specialize. Just because you don't race doesn't mean maybe there isn't something you want to target. Maybe you look at one of the specialty plans and there's heavy emphasis on anaerobic stuff and you want to get good at that for whatever reason.
I could see that for mountain bikers. Like if you go to a place like Moab with like a lot of technical steep little surges all over the place, if you want to be the thorn in your friend's sides or something like that on a group ride, anything like that, it's fun to kind of build that short fitness. Or if you want to just be the sort of person that can keep the power on for a long time, that's kind of the cool thing. You not being a racer, you have total freedom. You can be whoever you want.
And over the course of your rides, you'll see, what am I not good at? Does that matter to me? I mean, if there are things you can't do but want to do, well, that might be a cause for actually, either delving into specialization or modifying your other plans a little bit with workouts that address that specific limiter.
There's also this, so if you're not going to race and you're okay, you just want to have good fitness, you're happy with your body composition, you're happy with it. This is what my wife does. She really doesn't reassess FTP. You could just bounce between base and build over and over and over again. The workouts get pretty manageable. But if you're happy and you're not racing and you're keeping up with your group rides and it's not, you don't want to make it like a centerpiece of your life, you could do that,
You
right?
like the way your body looks. You like how you feel. You like how well you ride. I mean,
there's
if it ain't broke.
Just
Exactly
skip the ramp, probably just replace it with maybe the week 2 Tuesday workouts, repeat that again.
Sure.
Go through it all and be happy with it.
Let's go through some scenarios, and we can point out any any situations where you feel like you would deviate from the standards that we've already been talked about, or that we've already talked about anything else. It's like example 1, a really common one. I just want to stay fit for the weekly group ride. That's really common.
Yeah. You could just do sweet spot base 1 and 2 over and over again, quite frankly.
Sure. Or you can, and this is where you have a lot of flexibility. This is also something where if you're just looking to stay fit for that group ride, you can do plenty of stuff. You can even work through specialty and you'll still be fit for that group ride. But like you said, you can also just boil it down and keep it simple.
Just that base phase.
I just don't want to lose fitness. That's another one that we see, like where people, they're planning on some time off, something like that. They won't be able to race and they just don't want to lose fitness.
Yeah, or they want to say that they just want a minimal training schedule long term. And that's probably the best case, or that's a strong case for any of the low volume plans, really, whether it's base or build. You just pick a 3 workout a week plan and know that that'll touch it up. You could even shorten those hour-long workouts to 45-minute workout, 30-minute workouts. Doesn't take a heck of a lot to sustain fitness.
Improve body composition. That's another one. In other words, a person says, I want to lose weight, do something like that, or get bigger legs. We hear that sometimes too. So.
Or just eat what they want when they want, which is another, just vote in favor of consistency. Just have your 3 workouts a week, every week.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's the. We got another question that I almost included this week. And it's a person asking, like, do you guys ever like run reports on everybody that does the workouts and find like a consistent trait in the fastest people? That sort of a thing.
They do more.
They do more.
I did, yeah.
And it's consistent. That's the other thing. It's not that they just do a bunch one week, but it's just consistent.
Yeah. Over 6 months, they do more than someone who's slower.
Exactly right. It sounds so simple, right?
I know, right?
But the thing is that simple. When you are doing the work and that sort of stuff, sometimes you rack your brain, but then if you look at it, you're probably not as consistent as you think you are.
Oh, no.
And you can improve it. Then another one is I'm don't have a race, but I've got this annual insert ride, whether it's like a trip to Moab, like I said earlier, maybe it's a ride where you do a training camp with your friends, but it's like a loose training camp sort of a thing. And that sort of thing, you don't have to, once again, you don't have to prepare specifically for the demands of it, but you can if you want.
Yeah.
And in that case, too, we've talked about repeating base. You can even do something where you just repeat specialty if you really don't have any specific goals. If it's the type of training that you enjoy, you can totally do it.
You can't dive right into specialty if you have loose goals or no goals.
Yeah, exactly right. It can be fun to do. So, Patrick, we're going to rip through just a couple more here. Patrick says, for XC racing, how do you decide to use a lightweight helmet or an aero helmet? For example, during my last race, which had an average speed of 13.6 miles per hour and about 1,800 feet of climbing, I wore an aero helmet. But I'm left wondering if I should buy the lightweight helmet to save 70 grams. For what it's worth, he mentions he is 181 centimeters, 56 kilograms with an FTP of 250 watts, 20-minute power, 275. So I personally feel Patrick's barking up the wrong tree a bit here by looking at weight. I think that it's more about ventilation and aerodynamics.
Totally agree.
You'd agree too, Nate?
Yes.
So how have you decided which helmets to use for mountain biking?
If it's technical, I use a bigger protection helmet because we have the POC. What's the POC? Tectile?
The POC Tectile.
That one it vents really well. I mean, it has like more.
You're talking about
safety.
the Octal, the one without the visor?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The Octal.
Yeah.
Yep.
It goes back farther down your head. At a faster, more.
Yeah, Octal X is the exact name. Way to go, Chad.
Thanks, Chad.
Your head. I have it. No, I just like the helmet.
Yeah, it's a great helmet.
Yeah.
If pretty much on the other mountain bike races, I'm always wearing an aero helmet, except on something that is with steep pitches. That is, you're just crossing your eyes. I hope we had that on camera. I don't think we do. Just crossing his eyes, looking at me.
New coach.
Okay. So then the last one is if it's a steep hill. And it can be hot, and you get no airflow, right, in the trees. You just have to have that well-vented helmet, and you feel like you're dying.
It's miserable otherwise. You won't understand the impact it makes until you're out there experiencing it. It's awful.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Don't do it.
It's a microwave on your head.
It really is. And and you're at about, I think I just did math, 4.54 watts per kilogram.
Yeah.
So you're up there a ways, but you're not to the height of it. You're not, pushing 5.5 watts a kilogram where you really need to start splitting hairs and making your bike 13 pounds like Brandon's doing right now.
Yeah.
I mean, get up there and you can start fretting over stuff like this. But right now, make sure you stay cool. Prioritize that over
overweight.
over 70 grams.
Yeah.
I disagree with that. You can fret at any level because it always has benefit. But I agree. I mean, same thing as I wear an aero helmet on not a hot race. And if it's a hot race, wear airy helmet.
Yeah. In fact, we even did a helmet swap for you during Leadville.
Yeah, just because of that.
Yep. So when you went on the steep climbs, we actually gave you the helmet that was ventilated. And then when you were on the long straight stretches that weren't as, hot and steep.
And that was less about weight, but it was about cooling.
But in any case, I wouldn't fret the weight. I wouldn't sweat the weight. Not at 70 grams. I mean, if we're talking like half a pound on my head, for sure. But 70 grams.
It's not going to be a lot. Yep. And the cool part is helmets are just becoming more and more a blend of both. They're getting better at ventilating and that sort of thing. And for most mountain bike races, keep in mind, I know that you think that you're underneath the aerodynamic threshold, but you're really not. Like, there's so many times in a mountain bike race where you are way above that 13 miles an hour, which is roughly what they say. But then there are plenty of times where you're very far below that too, right? So that's, I think that a lot of the time you just look at the average speed, and I understand looking at that, but remember, there are so many times when you are going really fast on a fast section on a mountain bike and you're actually pedaling, not descending. That's when that aero helmet really helps. So it's good to consider. Whit says, I'm new to Trainer Road as of a week ago. I love the flexibility of your structured training plans, and I didn't know I could have both flexibility and structure. Your customer support's been great at helping me get up and running too. Sweet. Awesome. Good to hear. It says, according to Training Peaks, I achieve a Cat 2 rated sprint, but my 1 minute power is my worst, rated at top of Cat 4. I struggle to get it to Cat 3 rating. My 5, 20, and 60 minute power is firmly in the Cat 3 ratings. At 150 pounds, I can generate almost 1,400 watts, and my 30-second power is good, but beyond 30 seconds to a minute, my power drops like a rock. So to recap on all of those numbers, he's basically saying that he's good at sprinting, but 1 minute power is where things start to fall apart for him. So that's actually pretty common we see for plenty of folks. He says, it feels like my fast twitch can blow my cardio system away. But is that actually what's happening? It seems like I've observed this weakness during my road races. He asks, what training would you recommend in order to improve my 1 minute-ish power? Thanks, from Whit.
Yeah, so you're talking about 1 minute maximal or 30-second maximal power translating to 1 minute, and then the fatigue, the rate of decay, I guess, between there. And there's a couple ways you can look at it. I mean, first off, maybe don't employ your max strength if you're trying to drag that out. You could be overplaying your 30-second power, whereas if you just dial it back a little bit, extending it closer to a minute could be really feasible.
So what you're talking about there is if you're trying to put out a minute, don't start at your 30-second. Start it where your minute should be.
Talking max power so you can see how all his energy systems relate. So I guess it's kind of a different approach. So you have Cat 3 fitness and you just have a Cat 2 strength. So it's not you're highlighting a weakness when in fact you should be highlighting your strength, which is your 30-second power. So I would address it two ways. Do I want to improve my 30-second power and either increase the height of the power itself or drag it out for 35 seconds, 40 seconds, closer to a minute? Or, and I just lost my train of thought.
I think that the other thing that they can do with this is when you're really talking about improving that sort of thing, you can get obsessed with the smoothness of your power curve and making sure that it looks perfect, or you can look at the demands of the race that you actually have.
And that was the other thing. Does it really matter? So does that 1 minute power actually limit the way you want to race? Are you racing that way and it's holding you up? So again, weakness versus a limiter. Is this something that matters and I need to fix it? Or is this just kind of a weakness in my power curve, but it doesn't really affect the way I race or want to race?
Yeah.
I think the chart's wrong.
Yeah.
Dr. Coggin. Okay, so.
Oh, yeah, that.
Dr. Coggin, because that's what you're pulling it from is his power. Yeah. I think the 1 minute is way too high. At least, so my best power is 1 minute. It says I'm a good Cat 5.
And you were very good at 1 minute power.
Yeah, I'm good at 1 minute. Yeah. Like I think I put in 650 just now at my weight, and I'm like a Cat 5. And for my threshold, it puts me solid in as a Cat 3.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a good chart, but it's fun to see where you rank, but that's just crazy.
If it's weak anywhere, I seem to remember that 1 minute power being it.
Yeah.
That seems to be the point of contention for
stepping aside from the chart and thinking about this, Chad, you make a super good point. If it's going to be a limiter on race day, then yeah, you can focus on that, and you should focus on that. But if it's not a limiter, don't worry
and
about it.
you can get really specific with that focus, and I try to do that very thing with the specialty plans. I mean, I try to look at the demands of, I don't know specific course demands, but I know discipline demands. I know what a cross-country mountain bike race and how it compares to an endurance, something like a century, and I can devise plans accordingly. So I try to take a lot of that work out of it for you and see to it that you're going to be ready for most situations that you're going to see in the types of races you're doing. But if it gets hyper-specific, you can always address that in your own way.
Totally.
You can always become better at that very specific type of thing. If you know nationals comes down to a 2-minute climb and you're going to have to repeat that climb 10 times, that's what you're going to focus on, that very thing.
Do you ever do that the week before a race?
A couple weeks before.
Yeah.
Get really specific with it. I used to do it for Nevada City, and man, did it pay off.
Is a 1 week to, I'm asking for a friend, is 1 week?
I was just, in the week leading up to it, I mean, you could do little taper workouts. I wouldn't do any like full-on race simulations. I would save that for 2 to 3 weeks out, just because I don't want to drag that fatigue into the race itself.
Well, this friend is training through all the races. Suppose on the forum, someone said I couldn't ask questions myself. So
why not? I mean,
but this is good for everybody.
Again, if it doesn't mean a lot of fatigue during the race itself, but it does bolster confidence. Yeah. I mean, even if it costs you a little bit in terms of fatigue, but your confidence is that much higher. I mean, that's a balance you're going to have to figure out for yourself.
This is a principle, okay?
Yes.
So go John, pound sound, kick rocks, whatever.
Kick rocks, yeah.
Racing, not all races are the same, right? So you have this busy race schedule, and we've been doing flat road races or crits. That's different than the next weekend is going to be hilly races, which is going to destroy me. And looking at it, this is a great way to recon races, videos. You can see how slow people are going, getting the small ring, but also Strava segments.
Yep.
You look on this and you look for your category, and you can usually find a race and say, how long did it take them to climb these hills?
Yep.
And in this next race coming up, 3 to 4 minutes for all the hills. So I just did, I think, 5-minute low VO2 max repeats. I tried to do earlier on 3 minutes, but I couldn't because I was too tired.
Yeah.
But part of it's mental, but I think it makes me sharper.
It's specific race prep.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hard to find fault in it.
Yeah.
Other than doing too much of it too close to the actual event. Yeah. So maybe do it on Tuesday instead of Thursday.
This is kind of the common. I like working out Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, day off than racing. So it's not anymore, but rather than doing maybe it was in my plan, I switched something out to go into it to try to shore up a weakness that I have coming into a.
That's the nature of specialization, and it doesn't have to be reserved till the last part of your whole training cycle.
Yeah,
you can sprinkle it in.
Do bits of specialty or specialization all the while.
Go ahead, Nate.
The other thing, is it wit or white?
I think it's good. I think it's wit.
Okay, wit. To improve your 1 minute power, do the workout striped. I'm actually going to do that today. Striped is, you go from, I think, 15, 30, 45 to minute, and then you do that ladder back up.
Or red and white. I think those are both similar workouts.
Yeah, those are great things. There's enough rest in between, and I like it because you're operating very close to your max 1 minute power, but for shorter durations. But then it just gets longer and longer, a little less, and by the end, I think your 1 minute power will be higher.
I think in most cases, the one thing so let's say that a person doesn't want to train their 1 minute power. One thing I've seen people mistake I've seen them make with this is when they go out and they train that sort of a thing, they don't give themselves perhaps enough time to rest. They try to limit the rest, and they try to make them happen in close proximity.
Yeah, they try to make it more of a VO2 max workout than an anaerobic work.
Yep. And if you're doing if you really want to raise your 1 minute power, you want to give your body enough time to be able to fully recover.
You just want to maximize those efforts, and you can't maximize those efforts if you're shortchanging the recovery. So each one's going to be a little weaker than the one before it, which is exactly the opposite of what you want. Ideally, you'd start strong, get a little stronger, and start to trend upward over the course of the workout. Maybe the last couple start to fall apart, but that's good. That means you've kind of hit the wall. You've met your current capabilities, push yourself a little beyond them, or just a new level of stress that your body's not acquainted to, and then you're going to recover.
How much rest do you want?
In the case of trying to build 1 minute power, lots of rest. I mean, if you're going to do a 1 minute effort, I'd follow it with 3, 4, 5 minutes, maybe longer. Earlier in the season, later in the season, I'd stack those efforts closer together because I'd want them to be more repeatable. I'd want to be able to hit a high power target and recover for a few minutes and then hit that same high power target. Maybe not lift it, not like you would over the course of a workout, but more like you would during a race. You just want to be able to repeat it.
I think if you just want 1 minute max power, and repeat that, like you said, early season, I go for 8 minutes of rest.
Probably go 1 to 5 minimum. So 1 minute of work for 5 minutes of recovery. 8 minutes would be fine too. Absolutely.
Yeah. Nate, I feel like your 1 minute power is brutal. So,
But I'm a Cat 5 1 minute power.
Yeah,
that's true. True.
Then I'm getting ridden off a Cat 5's wheel because I don't even think I could sit on that right now.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go into Jim's question, the last one, and then we'll take some. Yeah, this checks in the mail there. He's going to take the money he was going to give me and send it to you. This is going to be the last one, but if you're joining us live, stick with us. We'll answer some of the questions you've submitted on YouTube and Facebook. This one's from Jim. He says, I'm 48 years old and soon to be 49. I've been riding 18 years with a good amount of those years having racing within them. I'm 5 foot 10 inches and weigh 215 pounds with an FTP of 270, up from 265 after following your Sweet Spot Base mid-volume plan. He says, I'm beginning the build phase and have found such value in Trainer Road and the podcast. Cool. Good to hear, man. He says, I'm curious about pre-workout supplements. Should you limit their intake to being just prior to especially intense workouts? He mentions, I did my ramp test today and took a pre-workout supplement that caused some pretty awful nausea after the test. Yeah, well, how do you feel about this, Chad? So he's specifically asking Chad how he feels about this. And he says, is there something to take that wakes the body up that is homemade so I'm avoiding harmful proprietary blends?
There is.
Thanks from Jim.
It's called coffee. Serious.
So so pre-workout's super common in the bodybuilding world and weightlifting world. Yeah. And it's definitely pushing into the endurance sports world too.
Oh, I wish it wouldn't.
And I've genuinely seen pre-workout that glows in the dark. I've seen pre-workout. One of them I saw was just called cocaine. That was the product name.
Okay.
No, it just C's. Yeah.
All with their proprietary blends.
Exactly.
That's my favorite term.
And these things, just so people can understand. A lot of these pre-workouts, so they don't follow. I'm loose on this. Okay, so please have some forgiveness. But a lot of them are not held to the same standards as
There's
other.
no standards.
There are no standards.
FDA can't regulate it.
Yeah, no standards.
So they can throw in plenty of different things, and this is actually how a good amount of athletes in different sports have been popped for doping because they just take a pre-workout, but they don't know it's not a controlled or it's not controlled.
This happens all the time in the bodybuilding world where there's not really testing. There is from the clean, but that's another thing. A product will come on the market and everyone goes, whoa, this thing really works. And they go out and everyone tries to buy it. And it's because it has some type of if not a steroid, like one chain away.
Amphetamine, something like that.
Or almost like a steroid. I forget what the term is called. But it's illegal. And it takes a while for someone to have a heart attack or something. And then they take it off the shelf or they find out.
Yeah.
And then, so it keeps happening over and over and over again. So if you're a cyclist and you can get tested, I would stay far away from this sort of stuff. Because Chad's going to list a whole bunch of stuff that is you're not going to most likely get popped for.
Yeah, no.
Probably the worst, though, right?
None of this stuff that I'm talking
about
is illegal.
How many cyclists, though, use that as an excuse? Because it happens all the time. They're like, I just took a supplement.
I don't know. I don't know what was in it.
Proprietary blends. Run from that phrase.
Yeah.
That means they have put anything they want to in there.
But even though if they list everything, there still could be extra stuff in it because they put a little extra. They get all these sales.
They don't necessarily know what's tainted either with their ingredients, the quality of their ingredients.
Who knows what their intentions are, but the outcome is you could be taking illegal stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Jim, your timing's perfect because I just a couple weeks, maybe just a week ago, read Asker Jukendrup's newest, one of his many blog posts on this very matter. So it made my job really easy because it's very concise and it saved me a whole lot of combing through my ever-growing document. It's pushing like 2,500 pages now.
That should just be a book.
Just do a word search, and it should, but it's so poorly organized it would take me forever to get it in order. But if you haven't heard of Asker Jukendrup, just like Louis Pasfield talked about sooner, he's someone you should absolutely check out. He's a researcher at Maastricht University in the Netherlands. His website is mysportscience.com, and it's a wealth of information. And he's a very reputable resource on matters such as these. So outside of the proprietary blends, which we obviously can't delve into, and wouldn't really be worth our time, I took from his document and from my own stuff that I think is probably most commonly used. What people think, pre-workout, I need this. This is going to give me a better workout. And the only one that stands up is caffeine. quite literally. I'll talk about the others, but caffeine's it. It is the only one. We know that caffeine affects the CNS, the central nervous system. It reduces RPE, heightens our alertness, which is beneficial in a number of ways, and has positive effects on endurance performance. News to nobody. But we also know that the brain habituates to the adenosine receptors get less and less stimulated, whatever. And basically every day we drink our coffee, and all that does is levels us out. And then we spend the day creating a caffeine deficit. And then the next morning we just return to baseline. So we're used to it. So it doesn't do anything. So in order for caffeine to mean anything in these pre-supplement or these pre-workout drinks, or over the course of a workout, you either have to go way overboard and overdose yourself effectively, or you have to spend a period of time resensitizing yourself to caffeine, which means cutting caffeine off, which for anybody who's been on caffeine for quite a long time is a pretty unpleasant process. I've tried to do it a few times, and I just don't last.
Yeah.
A couple days into it, I can't take the headache anymore, and I have a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And then timing is super important. We've talked about this before. It's roughly about an hour out. So if you want to be fast from the gun, you take it an hour prior. If you want to be fast mid-race or toward the end of the race, maybe you hit yourself with a caffeine gel appropriately timed. So the timing does matter, though. My pro tip is save your dollars and just drink coffee. But obviously you can't drink coffee during the workout. We're just talking pre-workout here.
Yes,
What about during the race?
I suppose you could. You could put it in your bottle.
Chad and I
There's
actually
no reason you couldn't put iced coffee in your bottle.
Both of us drink coffee during rides, right? Like hot coffee.
Yeah.
During
Almost always,
workouts,
almost always, even if it's an afternoon ride, I just like that extra little kick, which it's not much of one because I'm pretty habituated to caffeine.
Caffeine pills too. They're inexpensive.
Doesn't matter what the form is; it's just caffeine.
Yeah. And two, you can do that during the ride. Again, when you buy them, I go to the grocery store or to the gas station. I get kind of foil packs because if they're in foil packs, you can cut them, you put them in your jersey pocket, and in the longer races, it's just like a whole new level opens up.
It's interesting.
You don't start with it, and then after like 3 or 4 hours, you take 400 milligrams. 15 to 45 minutes later.
That's a lot.
It's a lot,
Well,
but it's a
it's
tolerable
like
dose.
It's a large Starbucks
Sure.
venti. And don't. I think I've said this a lot, but caffeine pills, to me, I drink a lot of coffee, are this next level fuel. Like you get the jitters hard. And I mentioned this I think in the last podcast, but you can use L-theanine in a 2-to-1 ratio of from milligrams to coffee to kind of help smooth out the jitters a little bit.
Yeah.
L-theanine is just an amino acid.
Yeah.
Did I mention that? Or did I not?
It does ring a bell. But
Okay. Well, hey, you can do it. So,
Mentioned.
yeah, exactly. Completely safe. And a lot of people, it's in a lot of like new supplements now for morning awakeness, which is just caffeine pill with L-theanine in it. But it's way cheaper if you just buy L-theanine separately. I hope I'm saying that right, theanine. I might not be.
Theanine, I hear it both ways.
Yeah.
Beta-alanine, beta-alanine.
I think we should preface this whole thing with consult with your doctor before you take in caffeine.
Don't listen to us.
But one thing I can say on this is that so I don't take in caffeine very regularly. Other than I usually have like a square of dark chocolate every night. That's like basically it, right? But then during
Just imagine in one square.
That doesn't count.
I'm looking at it across the table.
it's actually
You can remind later.
Chad actually kind of got me on that kick a long time ago. Chad had mentioned that was like his treat, and it's a good one.
Satisfying.
It's good
the
chocolate
urges.
too. Yeah, ritual chocolate's really good stuff. But then when I have a race like that, then I do take I take a caffeine pill, something like that before a race, and holy cow, I am.
Oh, I can imagine.
Oh yeah, it brightens you way up.
It's good to mention too that there is a legal dose of caffeine.
Yes, you can't go over a certain amount, which
It's a lot.
We'll
It's
put
a
that
lot,
into-
but
It's crazy high. But
We'll put it into forum.trainerroad.com.
And talk to your doctor and Google yourself. But it's not that much, I believe. For my size, like 4,000 milligrams
Yeah,
is starting to be there. But it's enough that you could physically do it. It's not like it's 100,000 milligrams. Like if I wanted to, I could kill myself with caffeine. Like right now, guys.
Yeah, please don't do that. So caffeine, I think it's mostly understood by people that it works.
So some of the other usual suspects when we're talking about pre-workout and all the things that we think are going to give us a better workout, beta-alanine is pretty up to toward the top of that list. And the promises, or what beta-alanine does, is it improves your muscle buffering capacity, and it does this by increasing carnosine. Carnosine and I think histamine go hand in hand, but this ups the carnosine side of things, which, but quite simply, increases your work capacity, decreases fatigue. Who doesn't want that? But it requires consistent ingestion over the course of several weeks. We're not talking a couple hours or a few minutes prior to a workout.
So here's the interesting thing with that too, right? And I think that you're
Here's
going to
what
get to
sells it.
this because when you take beta alanine, I don't know if anybody else, if you've listened to this, but my fingertips get tingly.
You get the tingles.
Yep.
Yeah, it's called paresthesia. It's just something that takes place with the dermis. They also get it in the nose.
Yep. Yeah. So you think, you feel it, and you're like,
it's doing something.
And there are entire memes about this, like when the pre-workout kicks in, and like, you know, people talk about the caffeine rush, but then they also talk about the tingliness, and that's from the beta alanine. So you think, I'm feeling something like that, so something must be happening.
Workout. And
But-
maybe psychologically it has an impact, so you know I can't knock it in that sense.
Sure, but it's not
doing
about what
anything
you feel
physiologically.
right there tying into the actual benefit. It's something that over time when you take it, that's when it proves beneficial.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, with
I bel-
consistency.
I believe too with beta alanine, it shows improvement from 1 to 8 minute power, but not on stuff faster than that.
So if you're doing an Ironman bike
It
leg,
makes sense. I mean, if it's
Doesn't
about buffering capacity or capacity, then it's going to be shorter power where you're accumulating
more lactate.
acidification.
There are products for this, but if you buy it just like a powder, it's super cheap.
Nice.
I think I have some in there, and I was taking it on short stuff. I'm going to take it every day now because it's reportedly safe. I'm not going to say it's safe. Yeah.
Some other ones. So there's beta
Okay, so
alanine, caffeine.
BCAAs, you know, your branched chain amino acids. So science says, I talk to science from time to time, it has to be ingested with protein for it to increase protein synthesis. So you can't just eat BCAAs and think my muscles are going to get bigger. They're getting all the necessary amino acids, building blocks they need. No, they also need protein.
I did not know
actual
that.
protein. So eat a chicken breast.
I'm
but
guilty of taking in BCAAs with nothing
while
else.
we're on the topic of protein, you don't have to do it. All this, you know, I'm going to the gym. I need pre-protein. I need protein before to maximize gains. Otherwise, I'm in a state of degradation over the course of it. I'm going to lose muscle mass. Science right now, again, is saying that the timing is not as crucial as we thought it was. So you can achieve the same benefits in protein synthesis, same positive protein turnover with protein post-workout. It might even be more effective than pre-workout.
So science disagrees with bro science.
Yeah, real science. I only talk to real science.
No bro science. What about creatine? Because that's in a ton of pre-workout
Creatine.
supplements.
So creatine's legit, but it's legit for what it's legit for, which is not endurance science or endurance work. So we're looking at high intensity work capacity, roughly 10 second sort of stuff. You know, the creatine pool that's directly in your muscles that helps regenerate ATP and does it really fast, but does not last very long. How is this relevant in our world? You know,
Right.
maybe with repeated punches, you know, hitting again and again and again, but that comes down to your rate of replenishment. So it's if you're light on it and you need to reestablish, so for whatever reason you know that your creatine stores are low, you can supplement to restore those levels. But and here's the kicker: so everyone thinks that my pre-workout mix has creatine in it, so I'm going to go and I'm going to have that extra bit of strength today to rep out those last few reps that I haven't been able to get. Whatever, they're going to have a better strength workout.
Yep.
You have to dose in order to affect your creatine levels 5 days at 20 grams a day. So that's a high level of dosing, 20 grams over the course of 5 days, every day for 5 days. Alternatively, low dosing approach is for 30 days, 3 grams a day. So at best, we're talking a week's worth of prep before you start to really achieve any benefits or feel benefits from it. Or if you go a slower dose route, 30 days, but no immediate pre-workout benefit.
So the 10 seconds, that'd be good for a sprinter. But the downside of it is that you carry more water weight. And for me, when I take creatine, it's like in that first week, 5 pound gain in water weight.
Oh, yeah.
And so as a cyclist, flat sprinting may be beneficial, but all the other stuff I do,
Even those sprints, we're talking like 5-10 seconds of it, and then it's all your glycolytic capacity, so your anaerobic capacity. So why not focus on that instead? I mean, why?
you do both. You
can, but supplementing to have a good initial pop one time. I mean, and you can spend
Right.
that so easily without allowing it to replenish. And by the way, replenishment takes place aerobically, so it's it still goes back to your aerobic system's capabilities. So even if you want to repeatedly use your PCR in order to, you use it up, and the only way it replenishes is aerobically. So again, via training, you can get better at replenishing PC stores.
It's not necessarily about what you're taking in there. It's more about how your body can replenish it.
I honestly don't understand. I just can't see how supplementing with something like that is going to make you a better bike racer in general.
It can make you look swole, though. So
It
that's
does,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, it's straight. I see the benefits for strength athletes.
For strength
Sure.
training, in strength training, this is the supplement that everyone says it's like caffeine for us.
Yep.
Just take it there's like no downsides if you're a weight trainer.
Electrolytes, that's another one that I see.
Yeah, so it's basically energy drink marketing. As far as pre-workout benefit to electrolytes, nope. I mean, your food probably has stocked your stores enough for the initial part of the workout, and then over the course of the workout, depending on how long it is, take in more.
What about taurine? I see that one.
Same thing. There's no real science to support its use. Not in terms of performance benefit, and not in terms of pre-workout benefit. And the same goes for B12, which is one I see all the time.
Oh yeah, they throw that in everywhere. And then I guess the last one, what's carbohydrate?
Which I mean, we know this is pretty straightforward. Heck yes. I mean, you just have to time it accordingly, and depending on what you're trying to achieve with the workout, the intensity of the workout, the duration of the workout, all the things we've talked about ad nauseum previously.
Yeah.
So caffeine and carbohydrates.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sounds like my world.
That defines Nate's.
And
that's
maybe beta alanine.
I guess if you took it consistently, perhaps you can get for that short sort of effort.
Yeah. I mean, if we're looking at it from a different perspective, overall performance over a longer course, but short term, pre-workout, want to have a better workout, no.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, let's head over to the live stream questions.
So we had one question a few times that I've seen is that people want to see the stretch thing. I know on the podcast, the stretch we talked about last time, people wanted me to demonstrate it.
Oh, Lee's warm-up routine?
Yeah,
reactive
exactly.
routine?
Oh, okay.
So it's what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stand up and I'm going to bend over once, then I'm going to do the deadlift, and then I'm going to do the squat.
People
then I'm
probably
bend
won't
over
be able
again.
to see because you're
They'll be able to see enough,
Cool.
I think.
All right.
So, Chad, you can...
Demonstration time.
Chad, do you want to talk through what I'm doing?
Not really.
I'll do it.
I feel like you can run this, and I'm not going to be within reach of my mic.
Okay, I can hear. Bend over. I'm like, to my socks.
This is great.
Deadlift.
There we go.
Squat. Bend over. I touched my toes that second time.
Way to go. And I can verify that he did not touch his toes the first time.
Now I remember what you're talking about.
So
That's it.
There you go. Another guy asked a question in the forum.trainerroad.com, and you can head over there and check that out. But he asked, what is the difference in the shoes, in shoe prices? Like he sees shoes that are plastic soles and then carbon soles, and he was wondering, why in the world should I spend $300 for a carbon sole versus $100?
$800 based on the one that specialized.
Oh, yeah, yikes. Yeah, that's an expensive shoe.
$800 lace-ups.
Yeah. So I two things, stiffness, and there's stiffness for power transfer, but you forget that stiffness also means more comfort. A lot of plastic soled shoes, not all of them, but a lot of them will be pretty flexible, and you have this fixed point where your cleat is. So everything flexes beside that spot, and it can create a really big source of discomfort for your foot.
Fatigue, yeah.
Yeah, so you get some stiffness there. In most cases, too, as the price of the shoe goes up, chances are that you're just using higher quality materials in general. The shoe will last more, it will stretch out less, that sort of stuff. So you're just likely to get more out of it. But that said, I've had some pretty cheap road shoes and mountain bike shoes before, and they're fine. They're fine. Like if you're looking at things to improve, that's definitely one that's going to give you a minimal impact in performance if you're talking about like one race day. So
yeah, spend your money on a trainer membership.
I couldn't agree more, Nate. It's pretty good.
This is some Ricardo asked, and some people have said this to me before. Is it Chad, when will Nate's training plan be released? With such great improvement, he deserves his own plan besides Baxter. And I've heard people mention about Jonathan is that there might be a perception out there that you coach us individually. You barely talk to us.
As little as possible.
Just joking.
No, but really, we just follow the plans. Like it's the same coaching that everyone else gets.
That's
from
the
you.
idea, right? The idea is for us to roll this out to anybody with minimal involvement on our parts past what we initially provide.
Totally.
And I switch some things out. Baxter being one of them for aerobic. If it's aerobic day, I just do Baxter because I like it.
Yeah.
And then small tweaks that we mentioned today. But we try to say the principles in this podcast so that other people can kind of understand those too. But really, I'm following the sweet spot base, general build, specialty plans.
Yeah, and I think over time you started pretty diligently following the plans, and then you figured out certain things, which I mean, it's an evolutionary process, right? You figure out what works for you, what doesn't, what's maybe a little too much, what's not quite enough.
Yep. Yeah, that's how it works.
LeConte's too much.
Yeah.
for everybody.
Whatever it is.
A question from Rolling Vegan says, would it be better to use my mountain bike for trainer road workouts in preparation for upcoming mountain bike events as opposed to my road bike? Not necessarily. If your road bike is set up very similarly to your mountain bike, then it's going to be very similar. In fact, you'll see that a lot of the top mountain bikers train on their road bike almost all the time. Every once in a while, they'll mix in rides, and of course, when they go onto dirt, they don't ride their road bike. But their road bike fit is not an ideal road bike fit. Their road bike fit is set up to match their mountain bike, which that's like their true north, so to speak. So no, it's not necessary to use your mountain bike for that sort of stuff. I don't.
If that's all I did, if like we were talking about how we do just about all of our training is done indoors, especially as I got close to events, I would, simply because I get on the handlebars, wide handlebars, and I've been on narrow road bars for a long time. It's a tough thing to get used to out on the trail. So if I could ameliorate some of that just by doing it indoors and getting used to that wider hand position, I would. Yeah,
it's certainly not a bad thing at all. But coming from the perspective, if you need to get bikes or anything else to get another bike to train on that sort of stuff, you probably don't have to worry about it. But if you're really into optimizing, optimize. Go all the way with that. Let's see. Nate, do you have one on Facebook over there?
Not yet.
Okay.
Someone asked if we juiced. Both Chad and I are juicing.
You're literally drinking something called juice, J-U-S, over here. Man,
Mostly
lots of questions.
delicious.
Very technical ones. A lot of people talking about the supplements.
I figured that would.
We got a few questions on this, on CBD for recovery and inflammation reduction, that sort of stuff. And the only thing that I haven't done much research into it, other than the fact that yes, it does seem to be an anti-inflammatory. As far as its potency and everything else, I don't know relative to other anti-inflammatories.
I don't know how it stacks up, and I don't know if there's a ton of research just yet.
Yeah.
I'm definitely paying attention, though.
Can I share a funny story with that, though? I got some CBD cream, and I opened it up, and I was like, this smells exactly like Bengay or Icy Hot. Like, exactly.
It's just the CBDs,
And then I put it on my legs. I didn't really notice anything different than what you would expect from Icy Hot. So then I went and bought some Icy Hot, and then I looked at the ingredients, and it is almost exactly the same, but then the CBD one just said CBD oils, mixed into it.
That's all it would be.
Yeah. But it's just,
need something to
I paid like
get the oil
6
onto your skin.
times. I paid like 6 times the price for that.
You're paying for the CBDs, though. You don't get that with Bengay.
But hold on. And then I ended up putting it on one leg and then putting it on the other leg and then switching it up and going through for weeks. And I cannot tell a single bit of difference. I don't know. It's tricky. It is proven to be an anti-inflammatory, but when you buy like the creams and that sort of stuff, chances are it's coming with a whole lot of other stuff instead of just the oil. So it's tough to actually attribute what's making the inflammation go down.
For me, I want more research in the area. And I know I saw one report where they analyzed a whole bunch of them. And some of the CBD oil had no CBD in it. Some of it had more, and some of it had THC in it.
Yep.
And
I do remember that one.
until it's
more controlled.
Yeah, or I have a brand that I super, super trust. That I'm not going to get THC in it when I don't expect THC.
Seems like Floyd's doing a good job with that. So I'm paying attention.
We'll see.
We'll see, yeah.
Another person asked, what are our thoughts on beetroot juice and powder, that sort of thing? I've blended beets, juiced beets, that sort of stuff.
Nitrate supplementation has proven to be beneficial.
Yeah, that's one thing we could have mentioned before your workout that does improve performance.
Yeah, I didn't look at that.
Yeah,
it's usually not in most pre-workout supplements, but it certainly could be.
So I've switched after my horrible thing at 40K TT. I had a juice of like this much of beetroot juice to powdered beetroot juice, which is you can get a concentrated version of the nitrate or nitrite or nitrate.
Nitrates. So the thing is, nitrates in the mouth, nitrates in the
or whatever.
I can't remember
beetroot
right
juice, go juice.
Yeah.
So I have a little powder thing that I can take with me. I put it in just a little bit of water. I can shake it up and do that like an hour before your ride.
Beet Elite.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And when you said horrible, you were talking about it actually made you sick.
Yeah,
it made both of us sick.
I think I had too much. Yeah, it's hard on the.
If
the
some
gut.
beetroot juice is good, more must be better. Is it one of those things?
Well, we both had like a serving like this big, and we got it blended at this local place. And the next day, both of us during that TT were very sick. I was extremely sick.
You think it's beet juice, huh?
I don't know. It's just a common theme.
I felt it in my throat. I tasted it. When I was riding.
Yeah, it wasn't very good. Yeah. Okay. Somebody's saying a question. can I do the criterium specialty plan outside on the road? You can absolutely try to replicate the workouts that you have scheduled out on the road. There are plenty of inherent risks that come with that definitely you take your responsibility on for trying to focus on doing a workout outside. But at the same time, yeah, totally. And it's very common for people to try to do the workouts outside.
On the road, yeah.
You just follow the plan. You're always guaranteed that you're going to get a better or increase your chances at strict adherence to the scheduled workout if you do it inside, aka a better quality workout. But yeah, you can totally follow it. No issues there. Let's see. There's a lot of very detailed questions on supplements, and I think Chad, you answered almost all of them. So
Okay.
Way to go.
And go to My Sports Science too, because there's lots more.
Perfect. Okay, cool. I think that covers it on my end.
Yep,
Right, you
looks
good too,
good.
Nate?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So everybody, you can head over to forum.trainerroad.com. This is episode 198, and you can find that there if you just look for episode 198. Search for that in the forum. Forum's an awesome place to be, and you can find out all the different things that we're doing there. You can also go to trainerroad.com to check out everything that we're doing and building. We have some exciting stuff. Stay tuned this week and into next week. We're going to have some unique podcast content that's going to be coming at you. We'll also have, hopefully, we'll have some exciting stuff to announce there with Trainer Road too. So stay tuned, and we will all talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.